Tales for Dark Nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
My phone buzzed in my pocket. I reached for it, only half listening to the sales meeting I was in. My boss was rattling on, stressing about how we need to push numbers, increase our revenue, the usual slog. The other 8 salesmen around the table looked as bored as I did, staring with half-lidded eyes, mouths slightly ajar. We'd heard the same pitch every year, and honestly, we were tired of it. If someone was dead set against buying, there was literally nothing we could do about it. I loosened my tie and checked my phone under the table. The number was blocked. My heart skipped a bit. Could this be? It was a text. It read, "Congratulations, you've been accepted." I wanted to jump up and pump my fist into the air, excitement rising in my chest like lava from a volcano. I couldn't believe it. After all this time, I had finally done it. After all my hard work and dedication, all those times I went the extra mile and thought no one noticed. It felt good to know it was all worth something. It felt great. The possibilities this would open up, the life it could lead to, it was everything I had ever wanted. I shot a glance at my boss at the head of the room, still rambling and pointing to a pie chart on his projector, and quickly sent a message back. "When do I start?" I placed the phone on my leg, drumming the tabletop, as I waited for an answer. I forced myself to breathe. I felt like I could burst for joy. I was tempted to give my coworkers the finger and walk out of the meeting, but resisted. I could stay professional about this. I wanted to call my wife and tell her the good news. She would be so proud of me. And the kids? Well, they heard what a hotshot their old man was about to become. I was so proud of myself. I was setting such a good example for my family. I was really doing this. And to think they picked me. I couldn't help but smile thinking about it. My phone buzzed again, and I quickly checked the reply text. "We start tonight. Meet at Quincy office at 8 p.m. for orientation. Feel free to bring your family. And well done." I felt like I could die with excitement. Tonight? My guts bubbled, and I shifted in my seat. There was so much to think about, so much to prepare. I thought about what lay ahead of me, and worms worked their way into my stomach. I pulled up my wife's number and sent her a quick text, not being able to help myself. They chose me. Orientation is tonight at 8. You and the kids can come. So excited. The finality of it hit me then. Something about sharing the news with my wife made it real. This was really happening. I was going to do this. Our lives were about to change forever. I was about to lead my family into the next tier of class. I stood up suddenly, pocketing my phone. My boss and fellow salesman looked up at me, eyebrows cocked. I looked around at their washed-out faces, almost feeling sympathy. How many of these poor saps would die at this job? How many of them had already settled into the monotony of what their lives had become? That's what separated me from them. I strove to do great things. I pushed myself and walked that extra mile. I had passions, fire in my chest. "Do you want to say something, Thomas?" I blinked at my boss, staring down the long table at his expectant face. "Thomas?" He called to me, finger hovering over the all-important pie chart. I looked around at everyone, a small smile planted on my lips. I snorted, shaking my head. I think I'm done here, guys. It's been a real pleasure, but, I started laughing, not being able to hold it in any longer. But I got better things lined up. Take care now, you hear? And with that, I marched myself out the door and followed by shocked stares. When I got home, my wife met me at the door with a big hug and a sparkling smile. She told me she'd left work as soon as she got my message. She was beaming, ushering me inside and taking my coat, compliments bubbling from her lips. She told me she was so proud of me and all the hard work I'd put into this. She told me I was special, that she had always known I was, and finally other people had noticed. I asked her where the kids were, smiling myself, the excitement and rush still fueling my emotions. She told me they were at school, but she had called the principal and notified them that she needed to pull them early. They would be excited, too. I just knew they would. What should I wear tonight? We're going to be there the whole orientation? Will they let us stay? She asked, running into the bedroom and pulling out dresses from the closet. I shrugged, grinning like an idiot. I don't know, hon. I guess we'll find out. She spun around, a small blue dress pressed to her frame, and said, How's this? Is this good? Oh, Thomas, I'm just so happy I could burst. She ran over to me giggling and kissed me, her arms around my neck. She looked up into my eyes, admiration shining from her own. Can I tell everyone? I laughed. They'll all be at orientation. You can tell them then, before we start. You know how these things go. We've been to enough of them, right? She smiled, a picture of beauty from ear to ear. I know. It's just so wonderful. We picked up the kids together, my two boys, from their middle school. They climbed into the back seat, positively beaming that they had gotten a half day. I wanted to take them out, have some fun, celebrate. As my wife pulled the car out of the school parking lot, I leaned over my seat, grinning, and looked at my children. I bet you guys are wondering why you got to leave school early. I couldn't help but feel a little smug. They weren't going to believe this. They both shook their heads. Well, I said, folding my hands, your old dad is going to orientation tonight. I've been accepted. Isn't that great, kids? Both my sons' mouths dropped in unison, followed shortly by whoops of excitement. I laughed and clapped my hands, enjoying their reaction to the news. Do we get to go? My eldest asked. I nodded. Sure do. All of you get to go. And guess what? It's tonight. Well, that did it. They screamed, the hype just too much. I laughed until tears rolled down my face, watching with delight that rippled across their faces like shock waves. It's wonderful to have kids. Oftentimes they say or react in the ways adults aren't allowed. Finally, I raised my hands and told them to settle down, still wiping the tears from my eyes. I told them we were going to have a family day of fun to celebrate, and then after that, I was going to take them to dinner. More eruptions of joy followed, along with a few shouts of, This is the best day ever! And I chuckled again, asking them what they would like to do first. After some discussion and negotiation amongst my family, we decided that we were going to go to the movies. After that, it was off to our favorite burger joint for dinner and milkshakes. We spent the afternoon in the movie theater, slurping down overpriced soda and munching on stale popcorn. After the movie, I wiped butter from my kids' fingers and ushered them back to the car. Despite having consumed a barrel of popcorn, my sons moaned that they were starving. Having not eaten but a few kernels myself, I was glad to hear it. I checked my watch and saw that we had 2 hours before we had to be at the Quincy office. We drove across town, our ride filled with commentary about the movie we'd just seen. My sons loved it, my wife not so much. I argued with my oldest about some of the plot points, goading him a little bit just because I was in such a good mood. My wife shook her head, smiling to herself, and enjoying the positive energy that sparked around us. 30 minutes later, I pulled into the restaurant and parked. Already shouting out what they wanted to eat, the boys bounded from the car. I opened my door and got out, telling them to settle down. The burgers weren't going anywhere. As I watched my wife follow our kids, it hit me like a shotgun blast. You're going to the goat room tonight. I bent over, suddenly in need of air, and sucked in the evening sky. I blinked a few times, clearing my head, the realization crippling my mind. I pulled in another couple of breaths and chuckled. The gravity of the night before me was astounding. At that moment, I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. I looked up and saw my wife calling me, asking if I was okay. I straightened and gave her a thumbs up and a big smile. I walked to them at the front of the restaurant, taking in my surroundings, letting the setting sun cast its warm rays across my face. What a time to be alive. We got a booth and ordered our food. I got my usual buffalo burger, watching the day fade into night through the windows. We chomped through the patties, my kids devouring theirs with alarming speed, and I ordered us all a round of milkshakes, as promised. I didn't think they needed any more sugar buzzing through their systems, but what the heck? We were celebrating, weren't we? As I watched my youngest slurp down the last of his frothy treat, I wiped his face with a napkin and checked my watch. My eyes met my wife's, and I nodded to her. You ready? I paid the bill and herded my family back to the car. From the restaurant, it was only a 10-minute drive to the Quincy office. As the night blurred past the windows, I felt myself grow quiet. My wife seemed to notice and did her best to shush the kids. She knew I needed some serenity, the weight of the evening approaching fast. She squeezed my arm and offered a smile. I returned it and focused on the road. I was grateful for her support, grateful for my wonderful family. You doing okay? She asked quietly. I nodded. Better than ever. This is just a big step for us, you know. It's a lot to take in. We pulled into the Quincy office, its many floors, towering above the parking lot. I found us a spot and noticed a few familiar faces already entering the building. The kids took notice as well and began to unbuckle and call out to their friends. I let them go, turning the car off and smiling as they raced to their buddies. The cool night air tickled my skin, and I felt kind of euphoric. Awe settled over me as I got out of the car. I walked around to my wife, taking her hand in mine. As we walked inside, we waved to Parkers and Kleins, both of whom had just arrived. The interior of the building was air-conditioned, and I nodded my hello to the security guard at the front desk. My wife signed us in. She always insisted on being the one to sign us in, and we went to the elevator. There was already a small crowd gathered around them, all waiting to ascend. I spotted my kids excitedly talking to their friends, and I guessed they were already spilling the news. Troy saw me and made his way over to us. He shook my hand and exclaimed, "Thomas, I heard your kids talking. I heard you got the promotion. Is it true?" My wife answered before I could, admiration lacing her words. "It sure is, Troy. I always knew he'd get in one day. He's such a dedicated man. How could he not get in?" I blushed as Troy slapped me on the back and congratulated me. He called his own family over and told them the news, earning me another round of thumbs up and courteous congrats. At that point, the news was spreading around the lobby, and I was suddenly assaulted by a barrage of handshakes and hugs from all of our friends and acquaintances. They all wished me luck, and I detected notes of jealousy from more than one of them. Finally, we piled into the elevators and pushed the button to take us to the top. The whole way up I got slaps on the back and smiles, an endless stream of affirmation. It was a good feeling, a great feeling. I looked at my kids and saw their eyes glowing with respect for their old dad. I reached out and ruffled their hair. A ding announced our arrival at the top, and we poured out, the doors closing behind us to collect the next batch in the lobby. My shoes clicked on the marble floors, and I saw Kent and Bradley, both rocking beautiful gray suits, I might add, already waiting for everyone. They held up their hands, smiling and quieting everyone. White light illuminated the hallway, casting a glare off the floor that almost stung my eyes. I blinked and focused on what Kent was saying. "All right, everyone, settle down," he announced with a grin. "I know it's a big night tonight, but we've all done this before. You know the drill. Follow Bradley to the conference room, and we'll get started in just a little bit." He turned to me then. "Except for you, Thomas. You come with me, and I'll start prepping you for orientation. When you feel like you're ready, we'll join the others in the conference room." I turned to my family and gave them all a big hug. I kissed my sons on the head and my wife on the lips. She beamed up at me and gave me a quick nod. "Go get 'em." The tide of people flowed down the hall, led by Bradley, toward the conference room. I went the opposite way, led by Kent, who brought me to his office. A beautiful polished oak desk dominated the room, the walls lined with oil paintings nailed to dark wood. It was quite the contrast to the modern marble design of the hallway, and as the door shut behind me, I felt like I was in a different building. Kent waved for me to take a seat on the plump leather chair opposite the desk. With a contented sigh, he plopped himself down in front of his computer and leaned back, folding his hands on his chest. I took my seat across from him and licked my lips, feeling a little nervous. "Are you nervous?" Kent asked, grinning. I chuckled. "Yeah, I think so. But that's a good thing, I think. I'm excited." Kent tapped the top of the desk. "Glad to hear it. Now let's get down to business. I know you're aware of how the first part goes, correct? I'll take you to the conference room and swear you in. After that, you'll say a few words to everyone, and maybe assure them of your dedication. After that, Bradley, I will escort you. Well, I think you know the rest." I nodded. "Then I go to the goat room." Ken grunted. "Yes. Then we go to the goat room." He leaned forward. "Now, do you have any questions for me? I'm assuming you know what happens after you're sworn in, and we move you." It's a silly question. I'm well aware you understand, but it's something I have to ask. "I understand," I said, "and I only have one question. It's about my family." Kent cut me off with a curt slice of the hand. "Worry not, Thomas. We've ensured a better life for not just yourself, but for them as well. The very fact that you're sitting here already has sealed that." "Again, thank you, sir." We sat in silence for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then he stood up and ushered me to the door. "You ready?" "Yes, sir." He led me out the door and down the hall, our footsteps echoing off the walls. I realized my palms were sweating, and I wiped them on my pants. Everything I had worked so hard for was finally coming to fruition. We entered a large room that was dimly lit. I looked to my left and saw the familiar stadium seating filled with shadowed faces, all excitedly watching me. Kent led me to a small table under a spotlight. As soon as we crossed the threshold of light, uproarious applause shook the room. I couldn't help but smile, staring out at the familiar faces. I felt like I was in a college classroom about to give some freshmen a lecture that would change their lives. Bradley was waiting for us by the table, clapping along with the rest of them. I squinted and saw my wife and kids in the front row, beaming from ear to ear. gave them a little wave and centered myself behind the table with Kent and Bradley standing at either shoulder. They let the applause continue for a few moments before Kent raised his hands, quieting them. He walked around to the front of the table and began to speak. "Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. Tonight marks the 32nd promotion. Tonight we honor our devoted friend Thomas. Let's all give him a hearty congratulations for all his hard work and contributions." More applause spilled from the crowd, and I began to feel like a celebrity. The room eventually settled, and Kent turned to me, picking up a small black book from the table. He motioned for me to put my hand on it. I knew the drill. I had watched the 32 others go before through the same ritual. I couldn't believe I was standing up here, no longer just an observer. I placed my hand on the book, already knowing the words that came next. "Do you, Thomas James Martin, swear to uphold your position to the best of your abilities?" Kent said loudly, his voice echoing into the now silent room. "I do." "Do you swear to give your life, if need be, in order to further our cause?" "I do." "Do you swear upon your faith and family that you will proceed with the purest intentions?" "I do." Kent then nodded, giving me a hidden wink, and passed the book over to Bradley, who took it and motioned for me to place my hand on the cover again. "Lastly, do you swear your loyalty and motivations are in accordance with our guidelines, and that you will see this through until you have completed your task?" "I do." He cleared his throat. Then, "Thomas James Martin, I hereby congratulate you on your promotion. Thank you for all you've done thus far, and pray for your continued dedication through all you endure." "Thank you, sir," I responded. Bradley glanced at Kent, and they both nodded. The book was lowered, and I was deafened by cheers and whistles. I smiled so hard I thought I'd rip my face in half. I winked at my wife and waved a hand to the crowd. Bradley and Kent both shook my hand and offered more congratulations. Bradley motioned me forward, offering the floor to me so that I could address everyone. The room quieted as I licked my lips and prepared the words on my tongue. "It is such an honor to be standing here tonight," I said, my voice strong and sure. "I owe so much of this success to the patience and guidance of these two men right here." I pointed to Kent and Bradley, who nodded their thanks to me. "I also want to thank my family," I continued, "for their undying love. I want to thank you for all your kindness tonight. I promise not to let you down. I promise I will see this through to the very end if need be." I paused, scanning the room slowly, taking it all in, meeting everyone's eyes. I love each and every one of you. I believe in what we do. I believe in you. I always have. And tonight I ask that you believe in me. The crowd went wild. Kent and Bradley motioned for me. It was time to go. I waved to the people and exited the room to cheers and whistles. It was time. It was time to go to the goat room. I had a sack over my head, the fabric blocking my sight completely. Kent was silent as he drove the van out of the city. Bradley was driving another one that held my family. I remained quiet, unsure if it was appropriate to speak. I felt the road vibrating through the floor as we trekked through the night. This was it. No going back now. I swallowed and felt my heart skip a few beats. I don't know how long we drove. This was part of the promotion ceremony that I had never been allowed to see. I knew what we were doing, but I was clueless as to how long it would take to get there. I wiped my hands over my knees, scrubbing more sweat from them. I summoned the faces of my family. They probably had to be blinded as well. I smiled inwardly, imagining my kids with black bags over their heads. They were probably complaining, giving Bradley a hard time. Finally, after what felt like a few hours, I felt the van jerk to a halt, and my ears picked up the spray of gravel under the tires. "We're here," Kent announced, breaking the long silence. "Give Bradley a moment. He's bringing your family inside now." I sat in the darkness as the van idled. My stomach churned as nerves wormed their way through my intestines. I took a breath to steady myself. I was ready. "Let's go," Kent finally said, pulling the cloth from my eyes. I rubbed my face, letting my vision adjust. We were at the end of a gravel road in the middle of an open field. In the far distance I saw woods swaying in the night sky. A large, single-story building stood before us, its plain concrete walls bare of windows. Despite its sprawling size, I only saw one entrance. I glanced at Kent and saw he was looking hard at me. "Are you ready to do this?" I nodded. "Of course." We exited the van, the small rocks crunching beneath my feet. A yellow moon hung fat in the sky like a infected boil on dark skin. I followed Kent up to the entrance, noticing a few more cars parked in front of the building, along with the van my family had come in. They were already inside, waiting for me. I wiped a hand across my face. Steady now. Kent pushed through the large black door, the entranceway lit by hanging fluorescents. I didn't see anyone, the interior as bare as the concrete walls that lined it. The air was musky, some long-forgotten odor rising from the ground. I wrinkled my nose and followed Kent down a long hall, our feet echoing across the bare concrete floors. The ceiling was high over our heads, lights hanging from it like dead bodies, motionless in the still air. "Where is everyone?" I asked. "Waiting for you," Kent answered, without turning. We turned down another hallway and were stopped by two large double doors. They pulsed with red light, and I could hear sound from the other side. Candles illuminated the space, stuck into the walls like knives, hot wax running down the cement like dried semen. Kent turned to me. "Here we go. Ready?" I nodded, pushing down my nerves. Kent pushed the doors open, and heat blasted across my face. The room before me was huge, circular in shape, its walls curving like a swollen stomach. A bright red light lit the space, shattering everything beneath it in an eerie glow. Seated along the far wall was the Word, his tall figure hidden by flowing red cloth that draped over his head and ran down to pool on the floor. He didn't move under his garment, giving him a strange statue-like appearance. Seeing him sit upon his bone-white throne, I wondered what he looked like, the fabric revealing nothing but a gentle pull around the mouth when he breathed. Sitting to the left of him was my family, somber, but I could see a muffled excitement underneath their watchful eyes. Spanning out past my family were the rest of the executives. They sat in their perfectly pressed business suits, eyes trained on me as I stood in the door. It was the first time I had seen them, knew who they were, and a couple of the faces surprised me. The floor was covered with red markings, circles, and hard angles crisscrossing along the concrete. Candles littered the floor, rising from the ground like broken teeth. The air was heavy and thick, almost fog-like, the red light obscuring my vision slightly. I felt something prod my back, and I turned to see Kent motioning me forward. Hesitantly, I moved toward the middle of the room and stood before the Word. I wondered where everyone else was, the prior 32 who had been promoted. I didn't see them anywhere. Perhaps they'd come later. My eyes circled the room, meeting the gaze of the higher-ups. I wasn't going to let them down. They'd see. "Hello, dear Thomas," the word said, breaking the pregnant silence. His voice rolled across the space between us like a bulldozer. I bowed my head slightly, a sign of respect. I couldn't believe he was actually speaking to me. It was hard not to pop with pride. My children would one day tell stories of this night, every detail of the tale spooling out in front of me in real time. Before we begin, I'd like to thank you for your unwavering loyalty. It has not gone unnoticed, and tonight you will reap the rewards of your efforts and commitments to us. The word shifted slightly, the cloth covering his head wrinkling in the haze. The lack of any eye holes gave his appearance an almost eerie look, as if under that robe something inhuman dwelt. "Thank you, sir," I said, hoping it was okay to speak. He spread his arms, the red cloth swallowing his limbs. "Let us begin, then." A door opened to the right of me, one I hadn't noticed, and two huge men stepped into the room. They were stripped down to their waists, their faces covered with hoods, one white, the other black. Bulging muscles coiled across their shoulders as they carried in a large chest, decorated with flakes of black and gold. They came and stood beside me, gently lowering the chest. When it was set, they turned to the word and waited for his signal. My legs felt weak, and I forced my knees to stop clacking together. This was what I had been waiting for. This is what it all came down to. I had talked the talk, and now I had to walk the walk. The word stood, the red gown rippling across his body like dripping gore, and spread his arms again. "Thomas, you were born a man, and now must be reformed into the image of our Lord. Kneel and be baptized with the blood of our God, so that your blood may be one with his." The men with hoods pushed me to my knees, and I felt sweat bead along my forehead. It was suddenly excruciatingly hot in the room, the red light warming the air like fire. The ground was hard under my knees, my joints popping as I took my place, head raised and ready. The man with the white hood opened the chest and took something out. He came and stood behind me, cradling my head with his bicep as he placed something in my mouth. I took the funnel into my throat, holding it steady with my teeth. He reached back into the chest and pulled out a clear jug that sloshed with fresh goat's blood. I gripped the funnel harder with my teeth. The jug he had held had to be at least 2 liters, and it was filled to the brim. The man in the white hood took his place behind me and wrapped a meaty arm around my neck, holding me in place. My heart danced in my chest like a wild drum. Sweat trickled down my spine in anticipation. I could feel my kids watching me. The hooded man took the top off with his teeth and tipped the mouth of the jug into the funnel. Blood sloshed into my mouth, taking me by surprise. It was warmer than I had imagined. I closed my eyes as it streamed across my tongue, flowed down my throat, and filled my stomach. It tasted like burnt metal, the thick liquid coating my insides. More! 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 I began to sputter, opening my eyes, and realizing I still had over half the jug to drink. My stomach felt distended, a bloated bubble of sick nausea. I began to cramp, and I had to fight my gag reflex as I ingested the blood, feeling it mix in my gut with bitter acid. The man tightened his grip around my neck as he felt my body tense. I fought to keep the liquid down. It felt like I was drowning. I forced my eyes shut again, my stomach howling as it continued to fill. I hiccuped and burped, spraying red out of the side of my mouth. It was like the blood was rising back up in my throat, trying to escape. "Please," I begged, "don't throw up." Suddenly, my abdomen hitched, and I felt the contents of my stomach hurtle up my throat towards my mouth. The man holding me felt it too, because he tightened his grip, locking my mouth shut around the funnel. He shoved a finger to block the hole just as blood and half-digested buffalo burger rocketed into my mouth. With no exit, the mixture of bile and blood exploded out of my nostrils like gory fireworks. I choked and struggled to breathe, my nose burning with stomach acid. I squeezed my watering eyes shut and forced myself to swallow the vomit back down. My body screamed in protest, and I let out another gooey burp, traces of stomach bile leaking from the corners of my mouth. Suddenly the funnel was removed, and I fell forwards onto my hands, gasping for air. I took a few steady breaths, dusting my body, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. Tears leaked down my face from the revolt my body had put up. Well, I thought, the easy part is over. I crawled back to my knees, still sucking in the hot air, feeling my stomach gurgle. The Word was sitting again, his figure motionless. Kent and Bradley were standing to his right, watching me with intensity. I looked toward my family, and my wife offered me a secret smile. My youngest gave me a small thumbs up, a grin plastered across his little face. The blood of the goat is now your own. The word boomed from his throne, for change starts on the inside, and from the inside one can change anything he desires. He motioned to the man in the black hood. Thomas, you have ingested his blood, filling your mind and heart with his warmth. Now reflect on these miracles as you transform into his image. I gritted my teeth as the man in the white hood held me still again. Black Hood reached into the chest, and I shut my eyes, preparing for the miracle. I felt my lips tremble, and I bit down on them. I needed to be strong. My family was watching. Black Hood grabbed my right arm and began sawing it off at the elbow. I screamed, eyes bulging as pain exploded like thunder. My arm convulsed as the muscles were severed from bone, the hacksaw chewing through my skin and spraying blood across my face. The corners of my vision blackened as the saw screeched across bone, sending lightning bolts of pain charging across my body. And then it was over. I fought to maintain consciousness, the agony unbearable. White Hood didn't release his grip. I watched through bloodshot eyes as Black Hood set the bloody hacksaw down and pulled a blowtorch from the chest. A blue tongue of flame poked from the spout as he brought it to my squirting stump and began to cauterize the open skin. I screamed even louder, the pain beyond anything I thought possible. Seconds later, I blacked out. When I came to, head pounding, and vision blurry, Black Hood was cutting my other arm off. After he sliced the last strip of skin from my new stump, my mind went dark again. The world swam, red-colored and air-hot. I was on my back, White Hood staring down at me. He gently slapped my face, rousing me from the nightmare darkness. I blinked at him and tried to speak, but the words died in my throat. White Hood looked up and told Black Hood to keep going, that I was okay. I wanted to see my wife's face. I wanted to tell her the pain would end soon. I knew it was going to be bad, but this was excruciating, far worse than I ever imagined. I tried to block it out, telling myself that it was almost over, that this is what I wanted. Black Hood began to saw my legs off, the blade spewing through my flesh, just above the knees. I passed out in a torrent of misery and pain, my howls dying in the air. I coughed up a mouthful of mucus and blood as I regained consciousness. My body was a furnace of agony. Something itchy was covering my face. My vision was limited. Heat. My limbs felt funny. Someone was talking, a voice muffled by my dreamlike state. I wanted to throw up. My head felt like it had been stuffed with burning coals. I tried to climb to my hands and knees, blinking the darkness away, but something wasn't right, and I fell back down. I shook my head and felt hands grip me and gently pull me up. I shook my thundering head, the black pulling away from my vision like a spider web. Metal hooves had been screwed into my elbows and knees. My body slumped and weak as I stood on all fours. The transformation was complete. I'd done it. The itchy mask covering my face must be the skin of a goat, my eyes now seeing out of the empty eye sockets. I felt my head was bare and guessed that they'd already shaved it and implanted the horns in my skull with a hot knife. I steadied myself on my new limbs, my hooves clacking against the cement floor. My body shook with effort, my muscles weak and exhausted. I ground my teeth and forced myself to stay upright. I could feel the goat horns digging into my skull. The skin pulled over my face smelt like rot and scraped against my cheeks like sandpaper. The word stood, and I suddenly noticed that there were more people in the room than before. Well, people was a stretch. To the right of the word were the 32 had come before me, the 32 who had gone through what I had and failed. They shuffled where they were, heads held low to the ground, a herd of unworthy goats. Their hooves shot echoes across the walls, an array of once human beings just like I'd been. Men, women, all with goat faces pulled over their own, horns jutting from their bare heads, downcast with shame. Leashes were tied to collars around their throats, the ends of which were held by Kent and Bradley. The Word leaned forward on his throne, assessing the state I was in. White Hood and Black Hood were planted on either side of me, arms crossed. I stared straight ahead, doing my best to stay upright. "Well done, Thomas," the Word said finally. A smattering of claps routed the room, the execs in suits nodding their approval. My wife had tears running down her cheeks and a smile that shone like the sun. My kids were slapping their palms together in awe at my resolution. The Word waited for the room to silence. When it calmed, his voice became deadly somber. "The rest is up to you now. You know the words?" I nodded, feeling the weight of my new horns pressing my chin to the floor. I worked my jaw so I could see properly out of the eye holes of the goat skin. Almost there, I thought. I've almost done it. The Word leaned back on his throne, scanning the room with unseen eyes. "This is it, my friends. Not a word will be spoken during this time. Thomas needs complete silence and total focus. I think we can afford him that. Yes?" He turned his covered head to me. "When you're ready." The two hoods backed away against the far wall, and the red light above us dimmed. I noticed now that the scarlet symbols beneath my hooves were glowing. Candle lined the edges to form a circle. I took my place at the center of the pentagram. I closed my eyes, concentrating my mind. I pushed all thoughts from my brain, emptying my head. I focused on breathing, on the heat that swirled around me. I saw the red light filtering through my eyelids and let it dance behind my eyes. Sweat and blood dripped off my new face and fell to the floor. My limbs screamed in their new form, but I silenced the tormented flesh. I drew in a long breath and then spoke, my voice strong and determined. "Dear Father, Lord God of the goat, I come before you not as Thomas, but as one of your flock. I have cast aside my worldly form. I long to be one with you. I've consumed the holy blood. I have whittled my body to mirror your holy image. I am yours. My life, my love, my future, my suffering. I beg you to return to the earth and lead us into glorious paradise. We stand ready, humbled, and in awe of you. I have displayed my undying devotion to you and my desire to follow in your footsteps. I pray to you, please, return to us now and lead us into your kingdom. As the last of my plea left my mouth, the room shook slightly, and a soft cry went up from the bystanders. Their eyes went wide, and they looked around at one another, mouths agape. My heart pounded in my chest as the pentagram flared and blood began to seep from the edges. I couldn't believe it. This had never happened before. Not a single person had conjured any kind of reaction. The herd of human goats looked up at me with shock and awe, their eyes bulging under their masks. The Word stood, his hands gripping the armrests of his throne as the floor quivered beneath us. The light flickered above, and a few of the candles went out, a sudden wind stirring the air. I shuffled my hooves on the floor, trying to keep upright as the quake continued, blood pooling from the cymbals around me. Even through the pain, I felt a smile creep across my face. I always knew I could do it. My wife had her arms around our boys, a look of utter amazement plastered to her face. And then commotion ceased. The ground solidified beneath me, and the red light stopped flickering, returning to its constant warm glow. The dust froze in the air, and then gently wafted back to the ground, the wind leaving as quickly as it had come. I watched in horror as the pentagram sucked the blood back into its borders, and the glow faded, and we were left in silence. No! No, we were so close! The Word roared suddenly. What did we do wrong? What did we do? The execs cast their eyes to the ground, devastating disappointment leaking from every face. Kent and Bradley shook their heads at me, frowns pulling their mouths to the floor. We were so close! The Word continued to scream. We thought this was the one! What did we do wrong? Kent raised his hands defensively. Sir, we followed the bloodline down to him. We were sure it was the right line. We narrowed it down so much, it has to be him. The Word waved a hand at me from under his robe. I'm disgusted by the sight of you. Someone get him out of my sight. Put him in the pens out back with the rest of them. No! I shouted suddenly. No, let me try again. I can do this. I know I can. Please! Black Hood was grabbing me, dragging me back and away from the Word, growling to shut up. I felt something clasp around my throat, and I was suddenly jerked forward. I had been leashed. No! No! Please, just give me another chance. I'm the one. I know I'm the one. I can do this. Black Hood kicked me into line along with the rest of the goats. They were streaming out the side door, pulled along by their own leashes as White Hood led him out of the goat room. Just as I was about to be pushed through the door, the Word turned to me, an arm raised. Wait a moment. We weren't wrong. We had the right bloodline. He turned to my eldest son. Just the wrong person. I thrashed against my leash, screaming, No, he's not ready for this. He's not ready for this. Get your hands off my son. I was 16 and had family down in Alabama. They're farmers, and they own a huge amount of land in Huntsville. My uncle owns a big house and a bunch of trailers they put out in the woods for hunting and camping. While I was down south, my cousin suggested we go out camping for a few days. We get to the camp, and it's obvious something is wrong. The air has a strange electric ozone-like smell, like right before a storm. We don't think much of it, and unpack and go down to a little nearby creek to swim for a few hours. All of a sudden, some older white guy and a white teenager come out of the bushes. He has a shotgun in the crooked of his arm and says hello. He asks what we're doing this far back in the woods. I tell him about my uncle, who he knows, and say we're camping out. He tells us we need to be real careful out here and stick together because there's a big animal in the woods. His son, who is my age, asks if he can hang out with us. His dad says, okay. We end up playing football and screwing around. There's me, the white kid Tanner, 5 of my cousins, and 4 of their friends. 5 girls and 6 boys. We're all about 15 to 17. We ended up just wasting the day away and then went back to the camp to set up for a campfire, even though we had trailers with kitchenettes. Tanner said he wants to run home and ask his dad if he can come camping with us. His family's property sits up against my uncle's. My cousin, Rooster, says he's going to go with him since it's getting pretty dark. One of the girls says she's going to tag along. At this point, it's about 7 p.m., and it's getting dark, pretty dark. They take flashlights and head off on the trail toward Tanner's property, and the rest of us just chill, make some s'mores, drink, and hit on the girls. About 30 or 40 minutes later, there's the smell of ozone again. It was so strong, you could smell it over the scent of the fire we had going. It's really nasty, iron-like smell, like you get after you've had a nosebleed. It wasn't exactly like dried blood, but it was that strong, metallic, back-of-your-throat smell. We immediately think that it's some kind of electrical malfunction, or someone left a hot plate on or something. We search the trailers and nothing's on, but we can all smell it. All of a sudden, we hear people booking down the road towards us. Rooster, Tanner, and the girl all come running into the clearing out of breath. They don't even break stride. They all just run into the trailer next to where the fire is. We all rush out of there and get into the trailers. They end up calming down a bit, but even Rooster is bawling his eyes out. Meanwhile, the fire is getting lower and lower, so my other cousins tell us to forget it, and they're about to go inside and start up the generator. Tanner said, "Hell no!" and locks the front door. Ain't nobody else going outside. He's been crying too, and his eyes are bloodshot and puffy, and his pants are incredibly dirty. He goes on to tell us that they went up to his house, and that his father said it was okay for him to go out camping. He just needed to make sure they were careful on their way back, and maybe they should take one of the hunting rifles just in case. Evidently, Tanner had seen something in their yard a few days before, and then one of their pigs had turned up ripped in half and eaten. They assumed it was just some big cats or coyotes, even though they don't usually mess around with live animals. He'd gone upstairs and packed his stuff and told his dad they'd be okay without the rifle because coyotes avoid people. So they started the walk back towards where we were camping. Rooster finally stops crying and shaking, and the girl had stopped too, but she was just staring out the window in a stupor. He says they had gotten halfway into the woods toward the camp when they started to hear strange sounds in the forest. It was almost pitch black by this time, so they weren't sure what it was. The girl said she heard something in the bushes right off the trail, and that they all aimed their flashlight beams over there. There was something standing back in the woods in a little hollow. Rooster said they'd shouted at whoever it was, and told him he was a jerk and was scaring the hell out of him. He said that's when he realized that the guy was facing away from them. So they kept walking, and they started to smell the nasty, coppery ozone smell, and they looked off into the forest on the opposite side and see a stranger standing in the forest backwards, but this time he's slightly closer to the path. So now they start power walking, and Tanner keeps saying he should have taken the rifle. As they're telling the story, the smell is still super strong, even inside the trailer. They say, after they started walking faster, that a kind of low gibbering sound had started coming out from both sides of the woods. They booked it back to the trailer. The girl said she flashed her flashlight out into the woods to the side of the trail and had seen something darting through the forest, and that the gibbering got louder and louder. By the time they could see the light from the campfire, something had come out of the woods and was just 40 yards behind them on the trail, so they ran flat out as hard as they could to the trailer. So we're out of the woods, and at this point we're assuming it's some rednecks messing with us. All of a sudden, my other cousin, Junior, starts going on about how he went to school with a Native American kid that was telling him about something called the Goatman. We promptly tell him to shut up, because the last thing we need is some spooky story at this point. But he keeps on going, on and on, about how it's the Goatman and how we're in his woods and blah, blah, blah. Now, at the time, I'd never heard of the Goatman or any of that. But a couple of years ago, the year before I graduated from college, I had a member of the Menominee tribe for a roommate, and I ended up asking him about it. To sum it up, it's basically a man with the head of a goat, and he can shapeshift and infiltrates groups of people to terrorize them. It's also supposed to be kind of like the Wendigo, and allegedly it's bad mojo to even talk to it, and even worse if you see it. Keep in mind, I didn't know any of this back when I was 16, so my cousin is going, "The Goatman is going to come in and get us." The girls are all terrified, and my cousins and I are all trying to figure out if it's just some hillbillies or if it's some sort of animal. All of a sudden, though, the smell just goes away. To this day, I haven't experienced anything like it. Usually, smells fade away or become faint, but this was literally there 1 second and just gone the next. After an hour, at around 9 or 10 p.m., we've calmed down enough to go back outside and stoke the fire again. We figure it was just some guys trying to freak us out, so we don't go back home. Well, we think that if we do, they'll just chase us through the woods or something. Nothing else weird happens that night, and we stay another night. For the main part of the night, nothing happens. At about 1 in the morning, we're outside getting drunk and telling ghost stories. As someone finishes a spooky story, I don't remember what it was about, the smell comes back, and it is so strong that one of the girls actually starts vomiting. I stand up and could actually feel how clammy the air was, and I say we should get inside. Something wasn't right. We should have just left right then and there. Instead, we all go back inside and stand around. My cousin keeps going on about how it's the Goatman. My cousin Rooster tries to shut him up. All the while, I'm just feeling that something is wrong, and I can't figure out what it is. We end up sitting in there for a while, and the smell is just as strong. We're terrified, and all huddled together in the camper. We end up cooking brats for everyone because no one wants to go outside. It's one of those packs with 4 brats in it, and we have a total of 3 packs. I grill them up on the stove and give everybody one. I get mine, and after a while, one of my cousins gets up and goes over to the stove to get another. He starts grumbling about how I got 2 and everybody else got 1. I look at him like he's stupid. I tell him everybody only got 1 because there were only 12 brats, and that if he wants more, he should just open up a new pack and cook some more. That's when the girl that had been with Rooster and Tanner just starts screaming, "Oh, Jesus! Oh, Lord, get out!" She's crying and shivering, and it dawns on my cousin, who is standing nearby, what was wrong. Me and him both glance around the room, and then I feel my heart sink. I run out of the cabin, and the girls run out with us. The trailer door bangs against the side of the trailer as everybody books it out of there. One of my cousin's friends asks us what's wrong. I start counting us, and there are only 11. I kid you not. My cousin verified. Just moments ago, there had been 12 people in the trailer. Being that everybody didn't really know each other well, nobody had really noticed the whole time, that there was an extra person. Then I realized earlier that I had kind of noticed something was off. You know how sometimes when you're just messing around having a good time, you don't sweat the small stuff? In those moments, you don't always remain aware of your surroundings. But at this point, I'm dead sure that someone else had been in the trailer with us, and that they'd been there for at least a day eating right alongside us. What makes it worse is I couldn't figure out which person it was exactly, because no one ever interacted with the other person. Well, we're all sitting outside, and the whole time, the girl keeps praying to Jesus. Eventually, we get some big sticks and go back inside the trailer, and there's nobody there. We count again, and there's still 11 people. Everyone gets in the trailer, and we lock the door. We explain what happened, and the girl says that she realized it too, and when she was about to say something, the person sitting next to her grabbed her leg hard and leaned over and said something she couldn't understand. So we were pretty terrified, and we huddled together. I fell asleep. When I wake up, the sun is just coming up, and half the people are asleep, and the other half are packing up their stuff. We want to walk back home, but 4 people insist on staying until the sun is all the way up. Some of the people think we're just screwing around and still want to stay in the trailers. I just want to get the hell out of the woods. The girl's name is Kiara, the one that said someone had touched her. I asked her if she really thinks it was something bad and not an ordinary person, and she says she just wants to go home and doesn't want to stay out in the woods for another night. So we decide to split people up, and the 4 that want to go can do so, and I have to stay because I have the keys to the trailers, and it's my responsibility to lock up since it's my uncle's. I'm downright furious at this point because I feel like people aren't taking the situation seriously, and I definitely don't want to be out in the woods for another night. I spend the rest of the day trying to convince the rest of the people, 4 guys and 4 girls, that we need to get out of Dodge. Tanner leaves with the other group to fetch a rifle and says he'll be back later. After they took off, that left 7 of us at about 4 o'clock. As 5 p.m. rolled around, Tanner hadn't made it back, and we were getting extremely antsy, and the only reason I stopped begging them to go back was because he had claimed he was going to get a gun. It's about 5:30 or so when my cousin, that chose to stay, announced that Kiara is outside. We all look outside, and sure enough, she's standing by the fire pit with her back to the cabin. I'm thinking to myself, if she was so scared, why the hell would she come back? And then I get this nasty feeling in my gut. That's also when I notice the coppery smell had returned, faintly. I can smell just a twinge of it. I tell everyone else about the smell, and they respond by laughing at me, and ask if I set this all up just to scare them. I give them a stern look. I'm not making this up, I hissed. Why would I play like that? So one of the girls goes outside to get Kiara. She gets halfway to her and stops cold. Kiara starts heaving. I don't know how to describe it. Convulsing? Sort of like if someone with their back turned was laughing without actually making any sound. It was then I realized it was unusually quiet in the woods. Dead silent. This was late September, so usually you could hear large flocks of geese honking or small birds chirping or squirrels chattering. So I step out of the door and tell her to come back in the trailer right now. She backs up a little bit toward the trailer, and we lock the door and pull down all the shades except one. We put someone in a chair to keep an eye on her. She stands there for about 20 minutes or so. Then the guy turns to say that she's still there. A second later, there's a huge bang on the door. We all jump and scramble around the living room of the trailer. The pounding is extremely hard. So now my cousin is holding one of the girls, and the other 2 are kind of giggling with nervous laughter. Meanwhile, me and the other 2 guys are losing it. Then we hear Tanner. He's screaming, "Let me in! Stop playing!" We go over to the door and open it, and he stumbles in carrying a rifle. There's no one else outside. As he tells it, his hike through the forest was uneventful, but upon approaching the campsite, he had seen a girl who he said wasn't Kiera standing there motionless. When he had gotten to the edge of the clearing, she had turned toward him with a slack-jaw sort of look and had stared him down, slowly tracking him as he circled the clearing on his way back to camp. He said it wasn't until he was roughly halfway to the trailer that he realized Kiera, or what looked like Kiera, was getting the gap closing between them. She had started off by the fire, and without him even seeing her move, she'd been turning and inching closer. He said he sprinted the rest of the way to the trailer, thinking it would be open. And when he got to the door and it was locked, he turned and it was about half the distance to the door. He looks around the room and then gets super pale. He pulls me to the side and whispers in my ear, "You know there are only 6 of you in here, right?" I felt my stomach sink. It, whatever it was, had been back inside the trailer while we were sorting out who was going where. It was playing with us. We look out the window and there's nobody out there. So we count everyone again, and then basically I go over and ask everyone how many people were here earlier. Everybody says 8. I ask, how many are here now? Everyone counts and then realizes there are only 7 people in the cabin. Tanner had brought back a couple boxes of ammo and his rifle. He told his dad there is some kind of animal in the forest because he didn't think his dad would believe him if he said it was the Goatman. He said that his cousin is supposed to be coming down in a few hours and that in the morning we can all go back to his place and that his cousin will drive us home. By then I'm really terrified, but at least I feel a bit better knowing that that's when whatever it is comes back, we can shoot it. Then my cousin gets into a huge argument with one of the girls who is accusing us of trying to prank everyone. My cousin keeps telling her that I'm not that type of person. She asks, how do we know the girl by the fire wasn't just Tanner in a wig? Or if it really is the Goatman, how do we know that this is the real Tanner and that the Goatman didn't just kill Tanner in the woods and take his gun? Tanner and I make it clear that we could seriously be in danger because, at the very least, someone has been sneaking into our trailer without us knowing and mingling with us. Goatman or not, we weren't safe in the trailer. One of the girls started to cry, saying she wants to leave right now. We're trying to tell her that that's a no-go because none of us are walking through the woods in the middle of the night. At this point, the sun is starting to go down, and it's getting a little cloudy out. We eat something and turn on the radio for a while, but we really can't pick up a decent station out there, so we turn it off at about the time Tanner's cousin Reese shows up. The sun is just barely over the horizon, and I see he has one of those heavy-duty lantern flashlights and another rifle. He walks up to the trailer, and we whisper to Tanner, asking if he's sure that's Reese, and he says yes. The guy looks behind him and all around the camp. Then he walks in and kind of glances at all of us and looks a little confused. Reese says, "Where's your other little buddy at? I figured she would meet me up at the trailer. Is she a little slow or something?" He also asked what we'd been cooking because it smelled like hot pans and raw meat all the way up the trail. We asked him, what's he talking about? He'd come down the same trail as Tanner had been using, and said he came upon the member of our group standing in the middle of the trail, looking at him slack-jawed. He said he asked her a bunch of questions, but all she did was stare at him, and then smiled. He said he kept walking, but she couldn't seem to keep up with him and kept falling behind. He asked if she was hurt, but she just kept staring at him. He kept walking and had turned around a bend in the trail, and when he turned back to check to see if she was keeping up, the trail was empty. He assumed she took a shortcut back to the trailer. We tell him the whole story of what's been going on, and he looks noticeably frightened. Since he was several years older than us, I expected him to say we were full of it. Instead, he listened and then sat down on the couch in the living room. He said when she kept lagging behind, it kind of freaked him out, so he tried to slow down and keep her in front of him. But no matter how slow he walked, she always tagged behind. He also said that from a distance he smelled a nasty smell that got stronger as he got closer to the camp. Eventually it got overwhelming, and he heard the girl, still trailing him, whispering something. He turned to ask her what she said, and found that she had caught up with him. He went to reach out for her to grab her shoulder, but he said he must have misjudged her distance from him, because she was off to the side of where he put his hand. The whole time she kept on staring right at him. At this point we were convinced, unless it turned out that Tanner was playing a joke on us, that what we were experiencing was indeed real. And from the look on Tanner's face, it was pretty clear he was just about ready to pee himself too, so we pretty much ruled out it was being a prank. Tanner and Reese loaded up the rifles, and we ate some more. We all sit around until about 11 p.m. To this day, whenever I think about this, I really pray to God that despite the evidence to the contrary, it was in fact some huge prank that my cousins played on me, and that they simply never told me the truth. Just after 11, the smell of iron becomes a really nasty, blood-like smell, like the scent of fried blood and singed hair. Tanner and Reese get up and grab their rifles. At the time, we hear a half-knocking, half-clawing sound coming from the door, and I kid you not, there's this voice, and it sounds like the noise cats and dogs make when their owners try to teach them how to mimic human speech. Whoever, or whatever, it is at the door, says in a halting, weirdly toned voice, "Let me in! Stop playing!" It made my blood run cold. One of the girls started crying again. I knew just one thing for certain. It was not a person talking. It didn't have the right cadence, and that's something that I never realized until that moment. All people have a certain cadence when they speak, no matter the language. Whatever was at the door, it didn't have that. I'm in full-on terror mode at this point. We keep yelling to whatever's outside, "Who are you? Stop messing around!" And it just keeps saying, "Let me in," for 15 minutes straight. Then the smell fades a bit, and for the next hour or so, we hear someone creeping around in the woods. Every couple of minutes it comes back to the door and says something, until finally the smell totally fades away at around 2 in the morning. Reese finally snaps, yelling, "Screw this!" He removes the safety from his gun, opens the door, and walks outside, rifle in hand. He fires a shot into the air and says something like, "In the name of Jesus Christ, go away!" He fires 2 more times. Then from the woods, near the river across from the trailer, it sounds like something is slowly gibbering and hooting. Then it starts screaming. It sounds muted, something like a woman and a cat screaming together from inside a bag. I've never heard anything like that, and before I had time to think, I heard a rustling in the bushes in the direction of the screaming. Reese fires over into the tree line, then starts backing into the trailer. We lock the door and can hear this thing keep on screaming. Reese says something had come out of the brush, really low to the ground, and then it began crawling toward the trailer, and he shot at it. That pretty much was how the rest of the night went. It continued screaming for the next 2 hours, and we could hear something moving out in the tree line. It didn't reapproach the trailer for a while, not until everyone had fallen asleep. Tanner had been sitting in the chair watching the door with his rifle in his hand, and nobody else heard or saw this. He told me 2 days later, after the whole thing was over. He said he had been nodding off after the screaming had stopped. He was almost asleep when he saw someone come out of the bathroom, then lay down in the middle of the floor and go to sleep. He just assumed it was one of us, and he nodded off. Then he said he realized something was off, and while pretending to sleep, he counted us. There were 9 people in the trailer. He didn't want to try and shoot the thing in the cabin, and have it kill us all then and there, or have Reese wake up and start shooting everything in sight. So he stayed awake all night pretending to sleep. He said sometimes it would stand up and move in a bizarre, jittery manner, or heave like it was laughing. Then it would just lay back down. From my perspective, nothing else happened. We woke up and I noticed Tanner was a nervous wreck and making a conscious effort to avoid looking at anyone. But we ate some breakfast, packed up and started walking to his house. He stayed last in the cabin and said he'd lock up and bring me my uncle's keys. He said to just start walking and he'd catch up. We got a little bit up the path, then he came rushing up and we jogged back to his house. A short while later, Reese took us home as promised. There was a window in the bathroom. When Tanner had gone back to lock up, he said that we had been too stupid to lock the window, and it didn't have a screen on it. The window was up when he went in there. I'm guessing that our uninvited guest had been taking advantage of the open window all along. It had waited for us to fall asleep or slip up and then made its move. Tanner told me it walked with us all the way back to his house. Then it fell behind, taking its place at the back of the group, looked them dead in the eyes, and walked into the woods.
The police cruiser rumbled down the long gravel driveway, trailing a moldering cloud of dust that hung there until they left. About halfway down, there was a sign nailed to a tree that said, "If you can read this, you're in range." Depicted below this tender sentiment was a shadowed silhouette of an AR-15. Sheriff Ron Ball doubted the man at the driveway's end could actually hit him from there, but he'd sure be a fool to try. Ball couldn't hit the man from here either, but the last thing this day needed was a needless situation. Most situations, Ball had found in his 20-some years of law enforcement, were just that, needless. And this one was likely no different. It gave one a sense of needlessness, being a steward of solutions to needless problems. But Ball supposed someone had to do it. It was just what he was supposed to do. Deputy Dingle pointed at the clever little sign as they passed.
See that there?
Yeah, what about it?
Well, kind of funny.
I don't believe funny is the intention, Deputy.
Well, I thought you just said how you had a funny feeling about this'n.
Oh, I do, the sheriff said. After 20 years of sifting through bullshit, you get a sense when something's funny. Not funny like a clever little sign, Dingle. Funny like a criminal trying to outstrip the law. They rolled on. At the culmination of the long driveway was a little ranch house with a tar paper roof. Sheep of all size bleated to announce their arrival. Piccolo, tenor, baritone, and one that sounded like a busted kazoo. Stepping out of the car, Ball spotted the particular sheep in question. He knew it was the one because it looked like a busted kazoo. Dingle got out and put on his sunglasses. He only shut his door after Ball shut his. They made their way to the front door. Before the two men could get there, the screen door opened, and out stepped the man of the house. Ball noted, through his keen police instincts, that the man seemed a little uneasy, maybe even a little guilty. "Well, thank heavens," he said. Mr. Laundry," Ball said, "what seems to be the problem?" "Well, didn't they tell you?"
Laundry?
asked Dingle.
Did I hear that right?
"That's right, sir."
Well, how'd you get a name like that?
"Figure his ancestors did the laundry," Ball said.
Oh, right, that makes sense.
Laundry shifted a little uneasily. "Gentlemen, I got a situation here. I'm not sure it's time to—" "I hear you had a little run-in with an unwanted guest."
Well, yeah, that's putting it mildly, Laundry said. But yeah, that's about the size of it.
And the fella's still here, I gather?
That's right. Just around the corner there, in the pen.
Ball gave Dingle a nod, and they followed Laundry around the side of the house. Laundry led them through a rickety little gate and into an animal pen. It appeared the pen was a kind of co-ed affair, with a number of different animals walking around. A few ducks, a threadbare sheep which didn't look much better than the busty kazoo, an unidentifiable specimen of poultry Ball took for a maladjusted turkey, and a nice little goat, perfectly black, but with a fancy little white beard.
That's the poor goat that was victimized, Laundry said. His name's Liberace. Grade A, FFA show goat, but humble as the day is long. Even more so now, I reckon.
But Ball and Dingle were not especially focused on the goat at the moment. Nearby was a shoe. The shoe itself wasn't so suspicious, but it appeared to have a foot still in it. And attached to that was a good amount of leg, a little red meat dangling out the end of it. The dirt underneath had turned brown where the blood soaked in.
Hey!
Dingle said. He clutched his stomach.
That there shoe and that leg is the guy who was assaulting poor Liberace.
Dingle looked about the bar for a moment, but his Adam's apple bobbed, and he choked it back. It was well known that the deputy had a delicate stomach.
Well, goddamn, where'd the rest of 'em go?
The farmer was patting the little goat on the head and muttering words of consolation.
Don't you worry, Liberace. These men are here to take care of things. They'll make sure you get your justice.
Ball approached the lonely leg and stepped on the toe of the shoe. The leg stood straight up, the bone visible in the end of it. It looked to have been sawed clean through. He took his foot off the shoe and the leg fell over again. A few ducks waddled away in disgust.
It seems like some manner of justice has already been delivered.
That fella there raped my show goat. FFA certified.
This fella here?
Ball indicated the leg.
I thought dispatch said he'd shot an intruder.
Dingle said.
That's right,
Laundry cut in.
I legally and justifiably shot the man for intruding on my property. But I also have the right to seek damages against his estate for what he done to my goat. Ain't that right, Liberace?
Ball and Dingle looked at each other, then at the goat. The goat was contentedly chewing a mouthful of grass. Laundry appeared to be chewing too, but it was just the muscles working in his jaw.
Oh, where's the rest of 'em?
Ball asked.
Rest of who?
Ball gestured at the lonely leg lying in the dirt.
Oh, aside the leg? The rest of 'em's over there.
Laundry took the two officers around the side of the house where the penned-in area continued. There, by a dilapidated old doghouse, was a pile of what used to be a man, but was barely identifiable as so. Beside the missing leg was a botched attempt at the removal of another. Along with that, the man seemed to have been partially field-dressed. His gut was sliced down the middle, with his victuals hanging out from whatever gristle normally kept 'em in there. Blood was everywhere. It was a mess unfit for Satan's stew pot.
Jesus!
Dingle said, his knees wobbling.
I thought you said you shot him.
I shot the man, that's correct. And not until I clearly identified him as a legitimate threat to my life and liberty.
A goat bleated, and they turned to see Liberace coming around the corner. He walked up next to Sheriff Ball and just stood next to his leg. Ball scratched the goat on the nose.
So, this the man they say violated you, little fella?
Well, that's him all right, dirty raping son of a bitch.
Do you know who the man is?
No, sir. I've never seen him before in my entire life.
Deputy, go ahead and check and see if he's got an ID on him.
Dingle hesitated. His Adam apple bobbed up and down.
Maybe you could do it? You're in charge, after all.
That's right, and that's why I'm questioning the suspect and scratching this goat while I'm at it.
Suspect? Snapped Laundry. The only suspect here is that one right there.
Well, I can't exactly question him, can I?
Laundry glanced at the corpse. Well, I'm only saying.
The dead man still had his jeans on, and Ball noted there did indeed appear to be a bulge in his left front pocket. Right there in the man's pocket, Deputy. Go ahead and grab that out.
I don't have any gloves on.
But I didn't say to check his prostate. I said to grab his wallet.
Resigned, Dingle took a deep breath and stiffened his upper lip.
He walked to the body and squatted next to it, with his head turned. He probed the thumb and forefinger into the man's pocket and extracted a worn and bloody wallet. He held it out like a dead rat. Bring it here, Deputy.
Laundry, Ball noted, was shifting his weight from foot to foot.
After 20 years dealing with the general public, Ball had learned a thing or two about body language. Most people didn't want to talk to him at all, and the ones that did were mostly talking bull, especially the ones that looked nervous. It got old after a while, real old. Just hold that open for me, Deputy. No sense getting both our hands dirty.
Dingle huffed. He held open the wallet displaying the expired driver's license. Chester Sims.
Oh, I know this fella,
Ball said. He compared the picture to the mess in the dirt.
Knowed him, at least. Wouldn't know him for looking at him now, would you?
He's the one we brought in for stealing a month or two ago?
He's been stealing since he was a teenager. Tell you what, though, I've never known him for a man to cornhole a show goat. Matter of fact, I don't think I've ever known any man as to one to cornhole a show goat. How about you, Deputy?
No, sir. Can't say I ever have.
Laundry, how about you? You ever known a man to cornhole a show goat? I mean, before this fella right here?
Not in a million years, he said. Ball scrutinized the man.
Well, you don't look that old to me,
he said. Ball patted the goat gently on the head. He looked it over a little bit, then straightened up and scratched under his hat band.
Deputy, does this goat look traumatized to you at all?
Traumatized, Sheriff?
You know, like it might have been made love to without express consent.
Dingle wrinkled his forehead and appraised the little goat like something on a used car lot.
Hard to say for certain, Sheriff. He looks all right to me, but it's hard to tell a goat's feelings by looking at him. The thing about goats is they got a way of just standing there.
Well, I'm no psychoanalyst, Deputy, but I'm sure if you want to find out if that goat's been fucked or not, you're going to want to have a look at that end of it.
Ball raised his chin to indicate the other end of the goat, the part you wouldn't usually give a scritch.
You saying you want me to look at its ass?
Well, I don't know where you'd fuck a goat, but I got a pretty good idea that's where this guy was thinking.
He pointed with his chin again, this time at the disemboweled corpse.
If he did indeed fuck it, that is.
I already told you that's what he did, Laundry insisted. The goat bleated, but not necessarily in agreement or disagreement.
Well, why do I have to do it?
You're the deputy. I'm the sheriff.
Well, who'd know better than you? I got no experience in that area.
Well, I'm here patting the goat on the head. How am I supposed to pat it on the head and look up its ass at the same time? I'm a sheriff, not some kind of contortionist.
Dingle huffed again, but the sheriff's reasoning was undeniable. Reluctantly, he walked around back of the goat and leaned over with his hands on his knees.
This is goddamn undignified,
he muttered.
You see anything?
Well, a goat's asshole, mostly.
Yeah? How's it look?
Dingle squinted.
Is there a way it's supposed to look? I got no frame of reference, Sheriff.
Does it look like it's been, put upon in any way? Get in there, Dingle. Get in close and have a good looky-loo.
With a note of distaste on his face,
Dingle got down on his knees and got right in close to that goat's ass.
It's hard to say. Oh, shit!
Dingle fell back on his ass and elbows.
What's the matter, Deputy?
Goddamn goat just shat in my...
Deputy, after what this poor goat's supposedly been through, the last thing it needs is to be made ashamed.
This is goddamn undignified.
Say, I don't know what you boys are looking for,
Laundry said.
but I assure you it's just like I said. I mean, just look at him. He don't need to stress. Poor thing's had his whole world turned upside down.
Ball looked at the goat. The goat chewed.
Well, maybe you're right. How about we just take a statement then, and let the poor fella be for a minute?
Sounds reasonable.
Deputy, you writing this down?
Dingle brushed the dirt off his trousers. He pulled a scratch pad and a pen from his back pocket.
Go ahead.
The sheriff patted the goat. It shook its tail and let out a few more pellets.
So it's your contention, Mr. Laundry, that you came outside and saw Mr. Sims here making love to your prize show goat?
He was fucking it, that's correct.
And then what happened?
Well, I seen him, and I told him to stop right there and put your hands up.
And when you said that, where were the man's hands previously?
Well, on the goat, I guess. Where else would they be?
On the goat's back? Like this?
Ball put his hands on Liberace's back. The goat bleated.
Yeah, just like that,
Laundry said.
Just exactly the way you got him now.
And what did he do when you told him that?
Well, he just kept going. Went right on fucking him. Right there in the ass. I tell you, Sheriff, I was so damn mad I could have smoked a pickle. So what's a man to do?
Ball nodded and crossed his arms.
Well, I agree with you, Mr. Laundry. I don't think there's a jury in the world would convict a man for defending his FFA show goat against such an assault.
Well, that's right. And I'd appreciate it very much if you could get this deceased person out of my goat pen.
The sheriff eyed the body, stroking his mustache in contemplation.
Just how many times did you shoot him, you said?
Well, just once, I reckon.
Just once, you said?
Yes, sir.
And he ended up like that?
Laundry looked at the mess on the ground. The flies had already started to gather on it.
Well, I must have hit him just right.
Ball was standing with his hands on his hips. He reached up to scratch under his hat band. Laundry was shifting back and forth on his feet a bit.
You, getting this, Deputy?
Yes, sir. Shot him once, hit him just so.
Ball took his sunglasses off and folded them, then tucked them in his shirt pocket. He regarded the mangled man in the dirt. He looked over his shoulder, but the aforementioned shoe with the leg in it was not even visible from here.
You'll forgive me for saying so, Mr. Laundry, but I've never seen a man shot once to end up in such a condition.
.308 hunting rifle. Good round. Never can say what it'll do to a body.
.308. Ain't that what you used to kill that buck, Deputy?
That's right, my daddy's gun.
And when you shot it, what exactly happened to it?
Well, it started to run off, then I guess it realized it had been shot and just sat down.
Any of its legs blowed off? Nothing like that?
No, leg stayed put. Didn't shoot him nearly as good as this fella.
So you say it's possible Mr. Laundry here shot this man once, and he ended up in such a state?
Well, I'm no forensicist, but that's what the man says.
I don't see why all the suspiciousness,
Laundry said.
I'm just a man looking out for his goat, the same as you or anyone else would.
Well, how did you account for the one leg being so far away from the rest of them, Mr. Laundry? I can't even see it from here.
Well, the dog could have tracked it.
A dog? Must have had to be a big one. What kind of dog do you have?
Laundry wiped his nose on his shirt sleeve, then wiped his shirt sleeve on his pants.
Well, I don't have one myself. I figure one could have come through the fence.
And where is it now?
Or hell, he must have run off.
Run off.
Well, that's reasonable,
the deputy said. The sheriff threw Dingle a glance, the one he used to say, "Pay close attention," with more than just your eyes and ears. The police instinct wasn't something you were born with 2020. It was more like a little baby you had to raise to adulthood.
Well, sir, I'm willing to entertain the idea that some cosmic anomaly caused this man to disintegrate the way he did when you shot him just once with that rifle. See, in my line of work, you're apt to come across all sorts of little curiosities. Ain't that right, Deputy Dingle?
Well, that's right, Sheriff. Every morning I wake up and think to myself I'm apt to see something curious today. And most of the time that fact bears out.
See, all I have trouble wrapping my mind around is that a fellow would do such a terrible thing to such an adorable little show goat. It's just unconscionable.
The goat bleated in agreement.
Well, we're in agreement there, Sheriff. It's a goddamn abomination. That's why I did my civic duty and put him down when I could.
Which is why I aim to make sure no jury might see things otherwise, thereby putting you, Mr. Laundrie, a moral paragon and model citizen, in any potential legal dilemma, by conducting a thorough investigation, of course.
Ball felt a tug at his trousers and saw Liberace had begun to nibble on him. He patted the goat on the head and pulled his pants loose.
Deputy, do me a favor and go and have a look at that fella's pecker there.
What? Whose pecker? You mean the chickens?
Well, the dead fella. Just go pull it out. See if it's got goat shit on it.
A pause.
You pulling my leg, Sheriff?
Ball shook his head.
Afraid our county is woefully short in the forensics department. Inevitably, some of that responsibility falls on us. But maybe Mr. Laundrie over here could save you the trouble anyway. What do you think, Laundrie? If I have Deputy Dingle here pull the man's Peter out, you think it'll have any evidence on it?
Laundrie's eyes were wide.
You mean to pull out the man's Peter?
He was shifting faster on his feet now. Looked like he was holding back a gallon of pee.
You got something you want to say, Mr. Laundrie?
Laundrie took a deep breath and restored his resolve.
I do not. I already told you what happened.
Ball sighed.
Dingle, go fish out the man's Peter. If it's still remaining, that is. With Laundrie's exceptional rifle here, it might have ended up somewhere else entirely.
Barehanded? But, Sheriff!
No need to be so formal, Deputy. Police work is dirty business.
Damn it, just undignified.
Dingle steeled himself and kneeled again by the body. Turning away, he seized the zipper of the jeans and yanked at it, losing his grip several times from the blood. Finally, with it pinched firmly between his fingernails, he was able to zip it down. He looked back at Bell.
Go ahead. It won't bother him any.
Well, I'm not worried about him being bothered.
Dingle, with a look on his face like he were reaching into an unflushed toilet, fished around in the man's fly until he unseated the bloodless, flaccid prick. Once he had it out, he recoiled, clutching the offending hand to his chest. Then he wiped his hand on his pants and stuck it in his pocket. He turned away and heaved.
Well, how's it look, Dingle? Look like it's been up a goat's ass?
You can't tell by looking at it.
Well, have a look at it.
I said I looked at it. Have a look yourself. I'm not feeling so hot.
Ball ambled over and looked down at the man's pud. There was really no way of telling whether it had been anywhere inappropriate, not by looking at it. Dingle was right. Bell returned to where he'd previously been standing and patted the goat on the head.
So far, our investigation remains inconclusive,
he said.
Well, can't you just take my word for it? I told you all I know.
Ball stroked his mustache.
We'll need to move this up the chain of investigational procedurism is all. Soon as my deputy gets his bearings there. You all right there, Deputy?
Ungoddamn dignified,
Dingle said.
Maybe so, but a man's life hangs in the balance, Deputy.
Man's deader than shit, Sheriff. Only thing I see hanging's his pecker.
It's not his life I'm talking about, Deputy. It's innocent old Mr. Laundrie I'm worried about. If it turned out we couldn't prove Mr. Sims here was indeed guilty as charged, then where would that leave poor Mr. Laundry? In a steaming heap of trouble, for all we know.
Laundry's face went white when he heard that part.
Well, damn it, fellas. What do I gotta do?
Hey, you've already done what you had to do. Now Deputy Dingle's got to get down there and examine the suspect's wiener a little more. Got to sniff it for evidence.
What?
Dingle had half a smile on his face, but it quickly straightened out as he realized Ball wasn't joking.
You can't expect me to do that, Sheriff. I'm no sniffer of men's Peters, live or deceased. Besides, I got no frame of reference.
The hell you don't. Very same goat here just took a frame of reference right in front of you. All you got to do is have a sniff and see if the aromas match up.
Oh, hell,
Laundry said.
Is that really necessary?
Unless you got something else to tell me, Mr. Laundry. Anything might have initially slipped your mind, maybe?
I most certainly do not. I told you boys what happened, and that's all I got to tell you.
Ball took out his shades and put them back on. He took a step toward where Laundry was standing. A little mourning dove flew out of a locust tree and lighted on the fence.
You told us something, all right. For 20 years now, that's all people have been telling me. Something. Whatever they think is going to make their problems go away. Or just make me go away. The minute you walk in a room, people start changing what they want to tell you. Nowadays, seems like the second I pin on this badge, someone's waiting to feed me a line of crap.
He took another step closer to Laundry.
And I think that's what you're doing to me right now.
Oh, hell.
Laundry waved a hand in dismissal, but his eyes showed something different. Ball took his shades back off and looked him dead in the eye.
See, I'd hate for the grand jury to get an idea you lied to the police about any of this. If that were the case, they might even deem this an unjustified shooting. And who knows what'd come of that? Life in prison? Death penalty? The way I see things, Laundry, is this man either fucked your goat, or you went and fucked yourself. And I mean to find out which one. And that's why Deputy Dingle here is going to have to suck that man's dead dick, just to check if it tastes like goat shit.
Wait, what?
Oh, hell.
Laundry looked different all of a sudden, a little like he was going to cry.
How about now, Laundry? You got something you want to tell me?
Laundry's jaw was really working now. A fella like him could only bear so much on his conscience. And by the state of the half-disassembled body nearby, Ball knew he hadn't the capacity to bear this one out.
Fuck,
Laundry said.
It's like you said. This fellow was fixing to steal a chicken. I got him doing it before. It just gets me so mad, that's all. Another man thinking he's justified to taking property. But after I realized what I'd done, I tried to...
You tried to make it all go away, and when you found you didn't have the stomach for it, you went ahead and called me. Good old Sheriff Ball, come down here and clean up your mess. That right?
Laundry looked away. The goat bleated, and Sheriff Ball scratched it under its chin. He looked back at Deputy Dingle, gave him a little grin. The look on Dingle's face was plain astonishment. The little dove cooed disinterestedly and flew back into the tree. Ball guessed it had been rooting to see Dingle go the distance. He had to wonder how long this investigation might have gone on if either Laundry or Dingle had the stomach for what they'd signed up for.
What's it even matter?
Laundry said.
Beg your pardon?
Asked Ball. Laundry took a deep breath, wiped his nose on the back of his sleeve.
You know, I've been farming this land since before you were even sheriff. And sometimes it feels like I'm only holding the spot for the next fella that's stupid enough to farm it.
Now, what do you mean by that?
You raise chickens. The coyotes get half of them. You grow crops. The rabbits eat half of them. Whatever you end up with, the government takes half of it.
He shook his head.
I used to get upset about things, but not so much nowadays. Because when it comes down to it, we're all just playing our parts. This fella here, he was supposed to steal a chicken. Because that's what chicken stealers do. And I figure I was supposed to shoot him. Because that's just what I ended up doing. And I'm sorry for lying, Sheriff, but it's just like you said. We lied to you because that's just what we gotta do to keep playing our parts. Like some big pointless game that just keeps going and going. And no one ever wins because the game never ends. And no one calls foul because the game itself is foul. And it doesn't matter how good or bad you play, because when you're done playing, you're done playing. And there's another one's right behind you, waiting to take your place. Another farmer, another sheriff, another chicken thief. And nothing in between makes a damn bit of difference.
The three men just stood there for a minute. It seemed no one wanted to be the next to talk. Only the soft sounds of the animals in their pens, the chickens scratching in the dirt, the crickets in the brush beyond the fence, the goat chewed. The man on the ground, eviscerated as he were, just kind of laid there with his dick out. Liberace was the one who broke the silence. The sheriff came out of his reverie and patted the little goat on the head. He'd always wondered what exactly goats were trying to say when they bleated like that. They seemed perfectly happy, just chewing, looking around, shitting every so often, and once in a while they'd bleat. It had taken them 20 years to realize it, but suddenly Ball knew exactly what the goats were trying to say. They were saying, "Fuck it," and Ball found he couldn't agree more. The sheriff cleared his throat. "You keep hogs, Laundry?"
Hogs? Yeah, I got hogs. Pig pens just on the other side of the house. Why?
Curious creatures they are. Eat just about anything they see. Damnedest thing. I've seen them eat their own even. Skin, bones, teeth, everything. I've wondered about that. But I guess that's just what hogs do."
A pause. A tacit understanding.
"You figure your hogs might be able to, tidy up around here?"
Laundry raised an eyebrow, turned to the mess and back to the sheriff.
Now that you mention it, hypothetical, of course, I suppose if given the opportunity, they just might. If that were to happen, in a manner of speaking, of course.
Ball straightened up and nodded to the deputy. Some of the color had come back into his face. He turned back to Laundry. "Maybe you ought to let 'em stretch their legs a bit. Fraternize with the ducks and chickens and even old Liberace here."
Laundry nodded.
That's a fine idea, Sheriff.
"Any thoughts, Dingle?"
Dingle appeared to mull on that for a moment, then said,
A little gray area, I'd say, Sheriff.
"I'd say so, too. But I've come to believe that that's where the game is played."
The three men looked at each other. A questionable triumvirate right under the wide-open sky, beyond which the trillions of stars and all their planets revolved without a hitch. There were no lightning bolts from the heavens. No one struck down. Not even a peep from the dove in the locust tree. Ball looked down at the goat, but Liberace offered no disagreement.
"He's a pretty goat, Mr. Laundry."
Well, thank you. FFA certified.
"Well, keep an eye out. Nobody fucks 'em."
Will do, Sheriff Ball. You two take care now.
Without a word, Ball and Dingle made their way back to the cruiser and got inside. Ball put his key in the ignition and just sat there a second. From between his thighs came a sound almost otherworldly, an unabashed crackling fart that went on an uncommonly long time. The men's eyes met, but not a word passed between them. There were no words left that needed saying. Ball put the cruiser in drive, and the two men went back up the driveway.
Just a little misunderstanding,
Ball said into his radio.
Yeah, no worries at all. Copy that. All right now.
Autumn was just setting in, and though it was early afternoon, the sun had already passed its apex in the sky. The leaves had lost their luster, and the dry dead ones crinkled under the wheels and spun in the wheel wells. Out on the main drag, there was a little dead dove on the roadside the sheriff was pretty sure he hadn't seen on the way in. One of its wings twitched, like the bird's dying effort to wave goodbye, or give them the finger perhaps. The sheriff had never known a dove to do such a thing, but every day was filled with curiosities. A million light years away, a star exploded. An earthquake shook the alien terrain of some uninhabited world no one even knew about. And all over the sprawling circle of the earth, there were acts of impropriety so dastardly even Laundry couldn't have thought them up himself. The liars were lying, the stealers were stealing, and some sick son of a bitch had his pecker up a showgoat's ass. Somewhere. But not here. Not today.
Say, Sheriff,
Dingle asked.
you weren't really gonna make me do that back there, were you?
Back where?
Ball said.
The fire at my campsite was burning low when the stranger separated from the shadows to join me. The collar of his long coat was turned up against the chill, and his bony fingers clutched a rough rope leash that extended behind him into the gathering night. Howdy, camper. I grunted, barely taking my eyes off the comforting flames. There was a row of fires burning all along this side of the hill, a testament to how many people had fled the city this weekend in search of peaceful isolation. My old husky lifted her head to sniff the smoky air in the opposite direction of the man, apparently oblivious to his presence. You lost or something? I assumed he had just stumbled into the wrong campsite and would soon continue to his own plot, but he maintained his rigid posture at the edge of the light. I watched his hands tighten as the rope pulled taut, long fingers remaining clenched as it fell slack again. You got a dog, too? I broke the silence again, shifting uncomfortably on my uneven stump. Don't mind Ambus here. Her guard days are over. She's almost blind and won't hear a thing you say unless it's about food. Ambus perked up again, leaning into me as I scratched the thinning fur behind her ear. The man in the coat took a step forward and perched upon a rock, about twice the distance from the fire that I was. His face was sour with pursed lips, the dark stubble on his face doing little to fill his sunken features. He gave a sharp tug in the rope, but it went taut as his animal resisted the effort. I could only distinguish his dog's silhouette in the shadows, but it seemed oddly lumpy and misshapen from here. The man pulled again, viciously this time, like the animal was out of control, even though it was just sitting there on the ground. The animal didn't relent, however, and the man just shook his head and let the rope fall slack again. Ambus used to be like that, too, but there isn't much fight left in her now, I chuckled. Ambus was giving into a scratch, and had slowly been rolling onto her back to grant me access to her shaggy belly. We used to hike here all the time when she was younger. There were fewer people back then, and she could just run without a leash as far as she wanted in any direction. Sometimes I wouldn't see her for an hour, and I'd get so worried, shouting for her until my voice was hoarse. But she always came back, trotting and frolicking, so happy and carefree that I didn't have the heart to stay mad at her. Wargle. The man spoke at last, a dark and guttural articulation. What's that now? My dog, Wargle. Come, Wargle. The fire won't hurt you." The man pulled again, this time with both hands. A deep, reluctant growl answered him, as though bargaining to be repaid for his troubles. The creature finally consented and plodded up to sit beside him. I laughed when the firelight illuminated the animal wearing a puffy green dragon costume with soft cloth ridges and wings sewn on the back and sides. The black lab had narrow yellow eyes, which indicated it knew exactly how ridiculous it looked. "Well, no wonder he's not happy," I said. "I'd be embarrassed to be seen in that get-up, too." "So he doesn't scare the children," the man said. He tried to pat the animal, but the dog growled and bared his teeth until the hand was removed. My husky rolled onto her haunches, crouched and alert. The hair was rising on her back, but I stroked her comfortingly until she settled to the ground. "Well, that's something new for you, isn't it, Ambus? Never seen a dragon before." She did catch a rabbit once, though. I saw her chasing it, but never thought she'd actually catch it. I think she was surprised, too, because the moment she had it in her jaws, it kicked her in the chest and she dropped it right away. I laughed and leaned back against my hands to stare up at the stars. This is probably the last trip out here for us, though. I don't think my heart could bear seeing these hills without her at my side. I tried to laugh again, but the sound came out all wrong. "I keep Wargle close, too," the man said. "He loves me deeply because he doesn't know any better." "Yeah? I didn't know what to say to that. Dogs sure are great like that." The man reached for the dog again, and it snapped at him this time. The man didn't flinch, so I thought the dog was just playing. But when he pulled his hand away, I saw blood flowing freely from a deep gouge in the fleshy base of his thumb. The man stared dispassionately at the red trickle running down his forearm. Are you okay?" I asked. The man smiled, and the firelight glistened off long, sharp canine teeth, filling his mouth. A low growl began rising in his throat. The dog in the dragon costume pulled sharply back on the leash, though, just as the man had done to the dog. The jolt was enough to silence the growl from the man, who now stared sullenly at me. Ambus began to howl. She was always a quiet dog, and it had been so long since I heard her make a sound like that, I thought I'd heard a wolf. She looked like she was getting ready to lunge again, but I grabbed her by the collar and snapped her leash back on. The old dog sprang anyway, launching herself a few feet before the leash snapped her back to the ground. "Ambus, no! Leave it!" The man began to growl again in response, but the black lab gave another sharp tug on the leash to calm the man. Ambus dropped to my feet and whined, looking at my helpless confusion for guidance. I do so love having an animal companion. Wargle and we're going to be together forever. It was the black lab speaking now, though, while the man continued to growl. I even caught a glimpse of evenly spaced human teeth in the dog's mouth. "Together forever. Would you like that? For her to be like Wargle?" the black lab inquired innocently. The voice matched the man perfectly, and my eyes kept flashing between the two to catch how the ventriloquism act was performed. The man's lips were tightly pursed again, though, the subliminal growl never quite vanishing. "I don't want forever." The words caught in my throat. "Then you don't love Ambus like I love Wargle," the black lab said. It twisted and pulled, and suddenly the rope slipped free from around its neck. It was advancing, but Ambus was ready. I wasn't expecting how powerfully my old dog launched herself. The leash tore free from my numb fingers. I flailed after it, too slow. The two dogs collided beside the fire, interlocking jaws, a howl from Ambus, a human scream from the black lab. They were rolling on the ground now, Through the burning embers, two writhing bodies intermingled in their violent dance. I tried to intervene and pull them apart, but the man was barking and snarling at me now. I could hear Ambus yelp in pain, though, prompting me to charge straight into the man blocking my path. He seemed unsteady on his 2 feet and collapsed readily, allowing me to leap onto the black lab. I gripped its dragon costume and wrenched it back, but the creature wriggled free at once and leaped on Ambus once more. The green cloth removed, the scattered embers revealed black and red interlocking scales like those of a serpent running down the creature's spine. The animal's human teeth made it a poor match for my husky, though, and the two of us were able soon to overpower the creature. The man had already fled, yelping into the darkness by the time I got the 2 dogs apart. "Traitor!" The scaled beast howled after its human. "Don't you dare run from me, Wargle!" With that, the monster sprinted into the night, chasing its human counterpart. I clutched Ambus to me, too afraid to check for her injuries, just holding her and gasping for breath while I listened to the shouting slowly disappear. "I won't let you go. I need you. Please, I don't want to be alone. Please, Wargle, please come back." Begging and then screaming, and now softly in the quiet night, I hear the animal crying as a human might, frightened and alone. Or perhaps they have reunited, and it really is the human weeping over how close he came to losing his only companion. Ambus wasn't seriously injured from the fight, and the dog's human teeth only managed to take a small piece out of one of her ears. She's sleeping at my side as I write this, whimpering slightly in her sleep. I stroked her to comfort her for a long time, but I've stopped since her patchy hair kept coming out in my hand. Since I felt the scales hardening along her skin and hear whispered words smuggled in amongst her quiet whimpering. I won't leave her here, but she might have to wear the dragon costume herself, so she doesn't scare the children. I don't want forever, but I'm sure as hell not ready to let go yet.
You know, they say the true measure of a man's wiener is by the woman who loves him. Now, I'm not sure if that was Confucius or Socrates or any of the other great philosophers of our time, but one thing is undeniable. Dingle must have been doing better than I thought in that respect, 'cause he'd hooked himself a good one. Now, good, you understand, is an objective term. If we're speaking even-handed here, it might be better to call her a biggin. Either way you put it, it's safe to say Dingle had found himself a stable companion. Now, that's not to say I have much confidence in Yolanda's stability as a companion per se, just that if you saw the two of them standing next to each other, there'd be no doubt she's the more stable of the two. In other terms, you'd sure as hell never see them playing seesaw together. And before you accuse me of making a euphemism right there, let me assure you, as High Sheriff of Splittail, you'll never hear an uncouthness like that out of me. Nor a swear, nor a lie, nor a discouraging word, nor a smart remark, nor an unsmart remark, nor a remark at all, nor a run-on sentence. Because with just one solitary man tasked with maintaining law and order in Splittail, there's no time at all for impertinence, particularly when your deputy's spending the day traversing the Dark Continent, dipping his wick into forbidden wax, and, if I had to wager on it, probably eating at the Y, too. Doing all sorts of unsavories, none of which I'm willing to discuss here. In any case, the seasons were changing in Splittail. This time of year, when the humble townsfolk make macabre their modest plots of land, string skeletons to dangle clicking and clacking from their tinny fixtures in the imminent winter's breeze, when dormant plots crawl with plasticine fingers and morbid baubles, when undead little gnomes haunt their sparse gardens, when chipped and weathered lawn jockeys hold aloft their lightless lanterns and lament their vitiligo, when stuffed soldiers cast long serrated shadows, warning away crows with their stalwart stillness and Oshkosh-Begosh regimentals, over a darkened landscape toothed with cardboard tombstones spray-painted silver, whereon the moon, swirling in its smoky shrouds, brings morbid messages to light. Here lies a man who held in his farts. He held 'em and held 'em, and held 'em since March. Yes, sir, that's right. It was Halloween season. Now, that's not to say it was precisely Halloween, because Halloween was a couple months ago. It's just to say most people were too lazy to clean up their decorations. The radio had been quiet that day, and with Dingle having what he called a personal day, and me all by my lonesome, I was feeling a little just like that. Lonesome. I thought I'd pay a visit to Mr. Laundry's new saloon, make sure the old fella was staying on the up and up. The straight and narrow, if you like that better. Because, you see, if there's one thing I've learned in over 2 decades of law enforcement, it's this. Some people, while narrow as they may appear, you can never take their straightness as a given. Some people you just gotta keep an eye on. I pulled up in front of Laundry's new saloon around noon. There were 3 motorcycles parked in front, which said to me the place was relatively hopping. Where there had once hung a help wanted sign, there was now one that said goats welcome. Now, there was probably some kind of law that cautioned against welcoming goats into fine establishments like this one. But if that were the case, I'd not been made aware of it. Inside the swinging doors, it smelled immediately welcoming to a goat. Laundry had quite the aesthetic in place. The former shoe store had retained not only its barn door bar and tables, but its original shoe store decor. Here and there, the left member of some long discontinued boot sat on a shelf, used as a bookend or decorated with a plastic daisy. By the bar stood the little black goat with the fancy white beard, contentedly nibbling on an L.A. Gear sneaker. And if the FFA-certified show goat Liberace had been put upon since that day back at Laundry's farm, you couldn't tell by looking at him. I went over and patted Libby on the head, and Mr. Laundry came out polishing a glass with an old shoe-shine rag.
Well, afternoon, Sheriff.
Afternoon there, Laundry. I just thought I'd pop by and check you were being compliant with all the regulations and whatnot.
Regulations, Sheriff? No one ever told me about any regulations.
Well, to be honest, no one had ever told me about any regulations either. But as High Sheriff of Splittail, it wasn't anyone's place to tell me what was regular and what was not. As High Sheriff, I was inherently the arbiter of regularity. That in mind, I wiggled my mustache a little, just to let Laundry know he'd better be extra cooperative. Ignorance of the law excuses not, I said, a phrase so old they invented it in Latin. See, there's no personal days when it comes to law and order, not in America, not in Latin America. So, when you're ignorant of the law, as High Sheriff no less, well, let me put it this way. If there's just one thing I've learned in all my years of law enforcement, it's this. Sometimes you just gotta wing it. Speaking of personal days, I thought it'd be extra nice of me to update the deputy on the current state of affairs just then. Personal as the day may be, I imagine law and order still had to be the first thing on his mind. Maybe second, in fact, because me out here all by myself the way I was, it had to be weighing pretty heavily on him. When you really think about it, he must have been worried sick. I held up a finger for Laundry to wait a minute, then flipped open my phone and dialed Dingle. It rang a few times, then he picked it up.
Sheriff?
Well, hey there, Deputy. How's your personal day? Or is that too personal a question?
Well, I'm pretty busy, Sheriff.
I'm 1023 at Laundry Saloon, Deputy. Just making sure Laundry here is in compliance with all the regulations. And I thought you ought to know all about that.
just so you wouldn't worry too much about me, all alone out here like I am. So how you doing?
Well, I'm actually kinda...
Come back to bed, baby. I ain't done with you yet.
I really gotta go, Sheriff.
Well, goddamn. I hung up. It was good to put Dingle's mind at ease. I turned to Laundry. Well, as I said, Mr. Laundry, every business around here has to stay in compliance with regulations. Now, I'm not going to tell you I know all the regulations by heart, 'cause I guess I probably don't. But if there's one thing I've learned in all my years of law enforcement, it's this. The police instinct is always correct, and I know what's regular and what's not when I see it. We both glanced down at Liberace then. The goat bleated. Nothing against your nice goat here, Mr. Laundry, but this is going to cost you $10 or the equivalent.
The equivalent? Sheriff?
Well, I'm not trying to run you out of town, Laundry. I'm far too benevolent for that. I'm only suggesting my benevolent willingness to accept a beer in lieu of said penalties, and maybe an order of mozzarella sticks.
Oh, yeah, equivalent. Well, naturally, Sheriff.
I patted Liberace on the head while he chewed his sneaker, and Laundry went off to fetch me a beer. Now, before you go accusing me of drinking on the job, let me shut that down real quick. Because a couple of right guy lawmen like me and Dingle, well, me anyway, you'd sooner catch me wearing a tutu than to lose charge of my faculties. And that's to say, you just wouldn't see it. I don't know about Dingle, but that sure as hell goes for me. Just then, that's when I noticed a cluster of fellas sitting at the table on the other side of the bar. Sitting kinda hunched over in a way a cluster of fellas might do, under their personal little cloud of cigarette smoke glowing funny colors from the neon boot sign that said open, which I noted as another violation, seeing as the sign was inside and clearly a redundancy.
Here you go now, Sheriff.
Laundry said.
My apology. Sorry for the violation.
He uncapped and handed me a green bottle. The fumes emanating from within smelled like a skunk's underpants, but I couldn't be bothered with quality assurance at the moment. There was something hinky about that cluster of fellas over there, and as the lodestar of justice in these parts, I guessed it was my duty to go over and have a looky. I pulled out my fancy cell phone and dialed the deputy. It rang 3 times and he picked it up.
What, Sheriff?
Deputy, I've got some hinky-looking Brunos at 12 o'clock. I'm going in to investigate. Just wanted to keep you informed just in case you were getting worried about me out here all by myself. So don't worry at all, Deputy. The lodestar of justice shines bright.
Baby, is that the sheriff again? Ain't you tell him you was busy?
Sheriff, I really gotta go.
Worry not, Fire Deputy. You know, if there's one thing I've learned all these years, it's... Well, the phone went dead just then. The signal around here can be tenuous at times. I approached the table, unsurprised to see the men were playing cards. Texas Hold'em by the look of it. There was a small pile of money between them, which was indicative these fellas were either going over their joint finances or gambling. Well, hey there, gentlemen, I said. You know, I couldn't help but notice you fellas were playing cards there. I also couldn't help but notice there was a little bit of money on the table there, too. Now, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I nearly thought for just a second the 3 of you might be gambling. But only for a second, you understand, because that would be illegal, and you fellas just look so darn refined and sophisticated and downright law-abiding. It seemed to me that'd just be completely impossible you 3 would do something like that. And I thought to myself, well, there's just no way on God's green earth you were breaking the law. All 3 of you at once, furthermore, because that would be just unthinkable, especially in a nice little town like this. All 3 men glared at me just then, and I don't believe I recognized any one of them. The 2 looked a little like Hall and Oates. Only if Hall had spent a few years in the can and Oates right along with him. And the 3rd fella might have been Oates' little brother, only with the skull tattooed on his neck. Something I wouldn't expect from Oates' little brother, if he did indeed have one, that is. come to think of it, maybe they didn't really look like hauling notes at all. But then the hall one turned his cards face down and kind of raised an eyebrow at me.
"You got a whole lot of nerve,"
he said.
"You know, the last time I went mano-a-mano with one of you goons, I had him dancing on his knees. So can the war of words and tell me what you want."
Well, talk about being out of touch. You know, if there's one thing I've learned in all my years of law enforcement, it's this. Crime pays, which is pretty much why people do it. But what did I want, he asked. All I'd hoped for was to check in on old Mr. Laundry and test a few mozzarella sticks. Well, I'm not sure this is about what I want, Mr. Cardshark. It's more about what I do.
"You some kind of local yokel or something?"
This earned a few chuckles from the rest of the band, and suddenly I knew what Dingle meant by the word undignified. "Well, goddamn," I said. "Can't you tell by my outfit what I am? I mean, I thought for just a second that you two were hauling notes, but then I saw your outfits and I thought to myself, now those two probably aren't hauling notes at all. So, the way I see it, you should all be able to tell by my outfit that I'm High Sheriff of Splittail."
"Could be a silly costume."
The Oats-looking guy said.
"That's right,"
said Hall.
"Maybe like the rest of this shithole town, you seem to think it's still goddamn Halloween and shit."
"Well, I suppose it could be," I said. "I suppose that's truly a possibility, even though this here is a genuine zinc aluminum alloy badge, and you'd be hard-pressed to find one of those at a costume shop. Harder pressed than Dingle's tan pants." Just the mention of Dingle made me remember he wasn't with me. Reminded me I was on my own, just a lone star in the night sky, immersed in the darkness. Which was ironic, because Dingle was probably immersed in the darkness himself, drilling for rare earth minerals in the forbidden preserves of Yolanda. And I pictured his tan pants would need to be pressed again before he were even much help to me.
"You got a lot of nerve,"
Hall said,
"coming in here with your alloy badge and your outfit. You know, the last time one of you county mounties tried to bust up my game, I gave him grounds for separation. I can't go for that, you understand?"
"Well, hold on, Mr. Cardshark there. I'm not making a formal accusation you threw your gambling illegally in Mr. Laundry's saloon here. Same as I'm not accusing you and you there of being hauling notes. I'm merely suggesting it appears that way. And last I checked, a little clarification on the matter is pretty well within my purview." The three men shot me a look at once, and I imagined what Gomez must have felt like when Bill Murray and the other two shot their lasers at him. Hall spoke up.
"I don't know nothing about a purview, Mr. High Sheriff City Kitty. Around here, it's pay to play. So the way I see it, you got two choices. Try your luck going through the motions, or sit your ass down and pony up. Do what you want, be who you are, but whichever way you choose, I'm watching you."
Well, at that moment, I was glad I'd left my shades down. Now, I'm not a proud man, mind you, but I am just about the finest, most diligent, most upstanding officer of the law you can find. And if all my years as such have taught me just one thing, it's this. Sometimes you have to pivot a little to get to where you mean to go, even if you're not quite sure where that is.
"So what's it gonna be, High Sheriff of Splittail? You want in? Or are the two of us gonna head outside and walk our 20 paces?
"Well, goddamn," I said. "You saying you want to challenge me to a duel?"
"Some things are better left unsaid."
He pulled a seat out from the table and turned it toward me a little.
$20 to buy in, 20 paces to buy the farm."
Buy the farm.
Chuckles all around. None for me, mind you, because there's nothing all that funny about this level of hinkiness in a nice place like Splittail. A place whose welcome sign declares Splittail, an upstanding community. And furthermore, underneath where it says, public officials prohibited from dueling. That in mind, I found myself in a sticky situation. So I set my skunky beer on the table and sat down. I fished a 20 out of my pocket and tossed it on the pile. Hall gave me a hinky little grin. His teeth looked like he had had the same diet as Laundry's goat. He slid me a stack of chips.
No limit hold'em's the game. Ante's a buck.
And just like that, I'd become filthy. You know, if there's one thing I've learned in my years of public service, it's this. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Laundry came sauntering over just then with a tray of refreshments, including my mozzarella sticks. He seemed surprised at first, then relieved when he saw the chips in front of me.
Well, I'll be, Sheriff. And I was worried you were gonna give them trouble. Them and me both.
Now, Mr. Laundry. Now, why would I do something like that over something as harmless as a little card game? It ain't like these fellas are making any trouble, are they? Putting upon your goat or whatnot?
Well, no, Sheriff. It's nothing at all like that. It's just a little harmless card game, like you said. Hell, if it weren't for me allowing a card game every once in a while, I'm not sure anyone would come by her at all. I'd go right out of business.
The goat bleated in agreement. Otis' little brother finished shuffling the cards. He dealt out 2 to each of us, face down. Then he cut the deck and burned one. Then he threw down the flop. 3 of hearts, 5 of hearts, and an ace of clubs. The men thumbed up their cards and had a little looky. I had a looky at my own. A 4 and a 6, both hearts. Well, goddamn, I said, and the 3 men leveled their eyes on me like I'd just coughed up a coronavirus.
My intuition says you've got a lot to lose,
the hall guy said.
Not one for foolish pride. That right?
Well, I wasn't about to say if it was or it wasn't. And with my shades down the way they were, there was nothing to see in the mirrored lenses but their own dumbfoundedness. Meanwhile, Oates tossed in 2 chips, and then it was to me. I took another little look under my cards, then went ahead and matched him. Hall and What's-His-Face did too. What's-His-Face turned over the next card, an ace of spades. I watched everyone check their cards again. Could be one of them had an ace himself. Could be all of them did. If there's one thing I'd learned in all my years of law enforcement, it's you never can tell what a fella's got up his sleeve, and that goes double for a fella like these 3. Oates pushed a whole bunch of chips in then. He counted them up and made 2 piles of 5, $10. Enough for a beer and a sandwich, or an osteopathic massage. Righteous bucks.
That's 10 to you there, Mr. High Sheriff.
Well, goddamn, I said. Give me just a second, would you? I pulled out my phone and called Dingle. It took him a few rings, but that's probably because he was having such a personal day and all.
Sheriff?
Well, hey, Dingle. Just a little question for you. Say there's a 3 of hearts, a 5 of hearts, and an ace of clubs on the table. And some hinky-looking fellas bet $10 he's got a better hand than you do. How would you handle that, Deputy?
You playing poker, Sheriff?
Well, I figure since you're doing all sorts of poking today, Deputy, poking and prodding and probably eating at the Y, too, I figured I might as well have some fun myself.
What the hell he just say, baby?
Nothing. Well, what kind of hand you got?
Well, I can't tell you that, Dingle. If I tell you what kind of hand I've got, then all these fellas here will hear me say it. And then they'll know what kind of hand I've got. The men were glaring at me so close now, I thought I knew what a shaving mirror felt like.
Well, then why you bothering me, Sheriff? This is supposed to be my personal day.
Well, there's 10 clams on the line here, Dingle. Maybe that's not a whole lot to you, being a big-shot deputy and all. But I'm just a lowly high sheriff, out here all by myself. A man estranged, a man forsaken.
Can't you turn off that phone, baby? Bets to you, city kitty,
said the hall-looking fella. Now you just wait a second, Mr. Card Shark, while I consult with my... Then, wouldn't you know it, the line went dead again. I put the phone back in my pocket, wiggled my mustache to recenter myself. A man abandoned. Well, goddamn, I muttered.
We don't got all day, Barney,
said the hall-looking fella.
You in or you out?
Well, completely surrounded by no help at all this particular day, I had nothing to rely on but my own police intuition. You know, if there's one thing I've learned in all my years of law enforcement experience, it's this. Sometimes a man's got to make his move. I'm all in, I declared, and nudged my chips forward. Then, for effect, I stuck a mozzarella stick in my teeth like a cigar. Somewhere on the high seas a ship sailed. A solitary star blazed in an empty sky. A lone wolf howled at the moon. A goat bleated. That last one was Liberace. The rest were kind of metaphorical. It was a minute or two before Hall broke the silence, and my reverie along with it.
You don't got a goddamn thing, do you, Sheriff Smart Guy?
Well now, I said, I certainly do have something, Mr. Hucklebuck. I guess it's just your job to decide what that might be. Another pause while the men weighed their risks and rewards. Finally, Hall said,
I don't want to play those guessing games with you, Smokey Bear.
He folded his cards. The others followed, and wouldn't you know it, suddenly I had enough extra cash for an osteopathic massage. It occurred to me then that I might even have a method going. An METHOD method. The hall fella glared at me while he put the deck back together and started shuffling for the next hand.
What'd you have there, Smokey? You can tell me.
Well, goddamn, I said. I've been so busy stacking these chips up, I just completely forgot. Ain't that something, Mr. Hucklebuck?
Listen here, city kitty. Hold'em's a gentleman's game, same as a good old duel. Promise ain't enough. We understandin' each other, Sheriff Smart Guy.
Well, I think we sure do, I said. I think we're both speaking exactly the same language. Now, I'm not sure about Mr. Oates over there, but you and me, I think we're precisely communicado.
Well, shoo!
The Oates fella muttered at his diminishing pile of chips. The third man still hadn't said a word. Hall dealt out the next hand and turned over the flop. A king of hearts, a king of diamonds, and a four of diamonds. And everyone but the silent fella had to whistle. Well, goddamn, I said. I'm definitely winning this one. Since I hadn't even peeked at my cards yet, I guess the other fellas didn't take me seriously. Probably thought I was just some country bumpkin who didn't know my way around the card table. Well, maybe there was some truth to that, but I knew something they didn't know, and that was I had a method. So just for formality's sake, I had a little looky. Not that it mattered much, with my method and all.
Nothing at all,
Hall said.
That's what you got, Sheriff Shitweasel.
He knocked on the tabletop with his knuckles. If you say so, fella, I said. Although if we're laying our proverbial cards on the table here, I gotta tell you, calling me Sheriff Shitweasel is bad sportsmanship, especially when you're sitting right here next to me smelling like a goddamn poopy pants. Hall started to stand up just then, but Oates went and piped in.
Shoo! Now there's no need for any silliness, fellas. Let's not spoil a nice game here.
He called me a goddamn poopy pants.
Well, let's just settle down. No sense being silly.
The goat bleated across the room. Hall slowly sat down, keeping a stinky eye on me the whole time. What's-his-face took another look at his cards and checked. Oates did the same, and when it got to me, I took another little look myself, just to keep up appearances. Not that it mattered much on account of my new method. And in accordance with my new method, I slid my whole mess of chips right in the middle. I'm all in, Mr. Fuckstick. So what say you to that?
Oh, you stinking son of a bitch. What kind of shit you think you're pulling?
Oh, shoo! He could have king.
Otis said.
You know what I think? I think he's full of more shit than the bartender's damn goat.
Well, I don't know about that, Mr. Poopy Pants, I said. I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but then again, maybe not. Hall was grinding his teeth now.
You're all talk, ain't you rotten cop? You don't got a damn thing, do you?
That what you think? I asked. Well, hold on just a second. It just so happens I've got my very own character reference. I dialed Dingle and pressed the speakyphone button so everyone could hear him. It took him a few rings, but I knew he'd pick up. If there's one thing I knew about my fire deputy, it's this. He's as faithful as an old dog. I'd recently learned a few other things about him too, but as I explained, we don't have to go into them here.
Sheriff?
Dingle, these fellas I'm playing poker with right now, they think I'm bluffing. So tell me, Deputy, have you ever known me to dissimulate my great natural luck? Or maybe I was just born with a turtle up my ass. What do you think, Dingle? Ain't I just as lucky as luck can get?
Is that the sheriff again, baby? Can't I just get some dick in here?
Well, sure, Sheriff. I'd say you were a pretty lucky duck. But I really gotta go.
Well, you go ahead, Deputy. I just needed a little clarification for my new friends. You see, one of them here, who kind of smells like he did the funky worm through a fertilizer factory, he thinks I might be bluffing.
You prick bastard. Your lucky is right. You're lucky I don't.
See, he just thinks I'm whistling Dixie 'cause I went all in on the flop. But you know better, don't you, Dingle? You know I can take care of business all by myself out here. With 3 hinky-looking bikers who most certainly have guns on them. You know I'd never play fast and loose with a few fellas like that, don't you?
Right, Sheriff.
That's right. So you just go on enjoying your personal day, and I'll just keep soaking these hinky Brunos for everything they're worth. And don't you worry, Dingle, because your job is as safe can be. As long as I'm safe, that is. Because just as every town needs a sheriff to ensure its safety, every sheriff needs a deputy to do the same for him. And that's why the sheriff's deputy is the keystone of all law and order. 'Cause at the end of the day, it all comes down to him. I say verily, Dingle, the weight of all that responsibility has got to be one hell of a load on your shoulders. It's no wonder at all you need to take a whole entire day off to roll around with your girlfriend, doing all sorts of unspeakable, unsavory, who knows what.
Well, I didn't mean it to be like that, Sheriff. I just wanted to...
Baby, what's that sheriff telling you? Why you look nervous, baby?
What the hell you up to, city kitty?
So what say, Dingle? Do you think I'm bluffing? Here, tell these hinksters here that I mean just what I'm saying. Well, it seemed like the second I asked the question, the line went dead again, and my new friends were no closer to the answer I was hoping to give them. Just suspicious, with their hinky little peepers all pointing my way. Hell, for a second there, I felt just like a purty fashion model.
You're bluffing, Flatfoot. It's written all over your ugly face.
I dare say, Mr. Shitdick, I didn't get to where I am by having an ugly face. And as far as bluffing, how about you see my bet there and you'll find out just whether I'm bluffing or not. Because if there's one thing I've learned in all my gambling experience, Mr. Butt Pirate, it's this. Money talks and bullshit walks. Ain't that right, Stinky Britches? Ain't that just as right can...
If I've hold this goddamn hand, Mr. City Kitty, I want to see what the hell you're holding. You understand me?
Now hold on there, Stinky. Those ain't the rules.
I don't care what the damn rules are, high shit stick. If I fold these cards, I want to see yours. And if not, well, it's just about high noon right now, ain't it?
Shoo! Another silly do.
That's right. So what do you say, City Kitty? If I fold this hand, you gonna show me what you got? Or are we gonna take this outside?
I can't go for that, I said. No can do. You see, because the way I see it, that just ain't fair.
Who said the world was fair?
The hall guy said.
You're out of touch, city kitty, and I'm just about out of time. So what's it gonna be? You gonna show me those cards, or are the two of us going all in? What do you say, you filthy so-called sheriff of whatever the fuck you are?
All three of the fellas seemed suddenly aware of their holsters, kind of shifting around in case things got past the point of hinkiness. It seemed the pickle I was in had gone from half sour to kosher deal, and if I didn't handle things carefully from here on, I might find myself in a pile of relish. Well, all right, my odoriferous friend. I say I'll do just that. If you fold, I'll show you my hand. But instead, he sat there studying me for a minute, taking little breaks to peek under his cards and count up his chips. Ultimately, he said,
That's awfully nice of you to offer, High Sheriff son of a bitch, or whatever you call yourself. But I'd rather take your money than take your life, 'cause frankly, I doubt I could get anything near $20 from your filthy hat at the pawn shop, especially with a hole in it.
Kinda chuckling to himself, he pushed a stack of chips forward to meet my own. Then he reached over and snapped up one of my mozzarella sticks without even saying please or thank you very much, and he stuffed it in his rotten pie hole right in front of me. And it seemed to me just then my method might not have been quite as rock-solid as I had first thought. In fact, I could feel my osteopathic massage slipping right out from between my fingers.
Oh, good gravy,
Otis said.
This is silly. I'm out.
And both he and the quiet guy folded their hands. It was between me and Stinky now, and whoever the victor, I had a feeling things were going to get hairy. He flipped the fourth, then the final card. A 3 and a 5, hearts and diamonds. Then he watched my face for whatever he was hoping to see there. Naturally, I gave him nothing.
Suck on this, High Sheriff.
And then he turned over his own cards, a king of clubs and an ace of spades, 3 of a kind.
How you like that kicker, boys?
And he watched me again, waiting for good old yours truly to concede defeat. So I let a few seconds go by just for effect, you understand. Then I picked up my cards and just held them there. You know, fella, I've been sheriff of this town for 20 years, and if there's one thing I've learned in all this time about dealing with hinky Brunos like yourself, it's this. You can catch more flies with shit than you can with honey. And I don't know if that was Confucius or Socrates or Shatner or whoever said that, but...
Turn 'em over, shit weasel. Turn 'em over and let everyone here see what your sorry ass went all in on.
So I did just that. A 2 of hearts and a 6 of spades. Now, I'm not sure my catching flies with shit metaphor was the most apt you've ever heard, but I was pretty sure of 2 things. For starters, how to count from 2 to 6, and second, that a straight beat 3 of a kind.
You sorry city kitty, Smoky Bear, son of a high son of a bitch.
The hall fella stood up from the table and pulled his piece out.
I don't care what the hell you've got. Going all in with a 2 and a 6? You think this is some kind of game, Smokey? Well, you and I are heading outside to settle this right now, like men.
His friends there seemed disappointed, but offered no protest. The hall fellow was clearly the head hinkster of this trio, and he was the one calling the shots. And without Dingle here to watch my back for me, it was time for me to play my last card. Still, I checked over my shoulder at the door first, because I had a pretty good feeling we might have some company pretty soon. Now you just hold on right there, I said. You just hold your damn horses, because I'm afraid you're the one who thought this was a game. You're the one who thought a perfectly honorable 20-year upstanding officer of the law would just sit down with a few hinky bikers and just play cards like it wasn't nothing. Well, I've got news for you, Mr. Poopy Pants. All three of you are under arrest for illegal gambling, and now you can add a charge for brandishing a weapon at a police officer. And add on to that for public hinkiness and for smelling like a goddamn oil refinery in public. And maybe also for impersonating Hall & Oates while you're at it.
Why, you filthy, cheating goddamn...
And that's when it finally happened. Just the very second Mr. Poopy Pants was thumbing back the hammer on his revolver. The swinging door of Laundry's saloon parted modestly, then widely, respectively producing my dignified deputy and his more substantial counterpart.
You all right, Sheriff? Goddamn!
Dingle pulled his piece out and went for Hall. Hall switched his aim from me to Dingle, which gave me enough time to pull my own piece. It also spawned a fire under Yolanda's ass that sent her into high overdrive, and all of a sudden she was moving in a manner that defied her size.
Don't you dare point that at my man, motherfucker!
Hall's gun went off, but no sooner than Yolanda dove in front of him. She squealed as the bullet hit her in midair, and she hit the ground like a downed elephant. I felt the floorboards lift beneath my feet. Dingle returned fire, 3 shots in quick succession. The first hit the Hall fella in the chest, the second knocked an L.A. Gear sneaker off a bookshelf, and the third went right into the ceiling. Both Dingle and the Hall fella were on their backs. Dingle, 'cause he couldn't handle his firearm, and the Hall fella, 'cause it seemed he had just lost his last hand. The other two at the table were just kind of sitting there watching, like 2 helpless young hinksters who had lost their big Bruno.
Oh, shoo!
Said Oates.
Yolanda!
Dingle scrambled onto his feet and ran to her side.
Oh, God! Are you all right? Where'd he hit you?
Oh, baby,
she said weakly. She lifted a shaking hand to put it within his own. He took it.
White motherfucker done ruined my damn manicure.
It was true. One of her long bejeweled nails had been completely annihilated. Well, goddamn, I said. Did he hit you anywhere else?
Ain't that bad enough?
She said.
Shit cost me $40. Plus tip, motherfucker.
At the sound of the motorcycle starting out front, I turned back to the table and saw Oates and his maladjusted brother had 23 skidooed. Liberace had been the first to notice, though, and was already by the table, munching on my last mozzarella stick.
Well, goddamn,
Mr. Laundry said. You know, Dingle, the pioneering spirit is decidedly American. Like all those prospecting fellas who traversed the Oregon Trail all those years ago. I can imagine them trudging through the wilds, fending off all sorts of wildlife and Indians, doing all sorts of funny shit. And you know what, Dingle? Maybe they weren't always available for the ones who needed them most. But how can you hold that against them? All they were doing is what their spirit commanded them to do, Dingle. Seeking their fortunes, exploring the unknown, maybe even eating at the Y from time to time. He'd joined me back in my cruiser while Yolanda sought medical care at Splittail Hair, Nails, and Jerky. It might not have been precisely the personal day he'd hoped for, but if there's one thing I'd learned in over 2 decades of law and order, it has to be this. The lodestars of justice need to shine bright 24/7. They have to, 'cause among the ever-present forces of darkness in our little town, God knows Dingle and I are the only ones around here keeping the lights on. I guess what I'm trying to say, Dingle, is I forgive you, because all you were doing out there today was answering the call of the human spirit. And you know what? You still answered my call too. Ain't that right, Deputy? Ain't that just as right can be?
Well, suppose so, Sheriff. Even though you really didn't have to be playing cards with a bunch of...
But I shut 'em up real quick by ruffling through the $80 I took from the table. I flipped halfway through, and before God Almighty, I peeled off 2 crisp 20s and handed them to Dingle. Because while Dingle's ass may depend on mine for its very existence, the deputy remains the keystone over my doorway to greatness. Not to say I'm not great already, you understand. All I'm saying is I appreciated it.
Well, thanks, Sheriff. I knew there was something wrong by the way you were talking.
Well, you've always had an ear for subtlety, Dingle, and that ought to take care of Yolanda's manicure there, seeing as it was just the one nail affected. A long nail, but just the one. And maybe there'll even be enough left over afterward for a couple's osteopathic massage. Then I considered things a moment and peeled off another 10 just to be sure. There, I said, that ought to cover it.
Why the extra 10, Sheriff?
Well, I just figured with Yolanda there's a lot to massage.
What's that, Sheriff?
Well, nothing really, Dingle. I'm just thinking in terms of square footage here. Surface area, know what I mean?
I'm not sure I'm picking up what you're putting down, Sheriff.
Oh, that's all right, I said. And all in all it was, because $30 was 10 more than I'd started the day with. There was one less hinky Bruno the world had to worry about, and as far as I was concerned, goats were still welcome at Laundry Saloon. See, you can hardly penalize an old man like Mr. Laundry for keeping livestock in his restaurant when all he's trying to do is get by. Hell, when it comes down to it, there's probably a law against leaving your Halloween decorations up for months after the fact. But if there's one thing I've learned in all my years of law enforcement, and believe me, there are a couple of them, it's this. In the never-ending struggle for justice, some laws are just more important to enforce than others. Finders keepers, for instance, because Mr. Poopy Pants had a pretty nice Harley parked outside, and you can't very well feed that to Laundry's pigs, can you? No, that would be a plain waste. See, we pioneering types have a long, treacherous road to follow, and when that road gets extra curvy, your best bet is to step down on that outside peg and lean right into it.
So how's the food at Laundry's anyway?
Dingle asked. Well, Dingle, I'm not exactly qualified to give it as a GAT rating, but I'll say this much. The mozzarella sticks are good enough for a goat, the decor is great for a shoe store, and if you play your cards straight, the clientele are awfully generous. Dingle raised an eyebrow at me, and for a second there I knew just what it felt like to be a tricky algebra problem. And that's no big surprise. See, as much as we do have in common, you know what they say about men. Some men drink cheap beer and toss their cans in the street. Others sip red wine and drink their malt whiskey neat. Now, I can't tell you exactly which great philosopher of our time came up with that one, but I can certainly tell you this. I'll give it a good think while I'm driving home on my new Harley. You've been listening to Goats Welcome by Geoff Sturtevant. A good reminder to use your personal days sparingly, whether it's destiny calling, your own pioneering spirit, or simply a friend in need. You don't want to get caught having your knob adjusted. A little about the author. Geoff Sturtevant is a nosy peeper who ought to keep to his own damn business. You can find some of his audiobooks at flexfiction.com. But the best place to find them is probably right here on Chillin' Tales for Dark Nights. He's a company man, you understand. And while you're at it, please remember to stop by our iTunes page or wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts and leave us a 5-star review and a kind word. It helps more than you might think, and I'd really appreciate it. To hear a premium ad-free edition of tonight's and all our other episodes, visit simplyscarypodcast.com today and click the patrons link in the menu at the top of the screen. You'll find yourself at chillingtalesfordarknights.com, where you can become a patron for as little as $5 per month and get access to our entire audio archive dating all the way back to 2012. Including past episodes of this program and all our other shows, and hundreds of standalone releases, all of them ad-free and available to download or stream. Thank you for your time and for supporting our sponsors. When you support our sponsors, you help support this show. If you happen to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, you can follow and subscribe to Chillin' Tales for Dark Nights there, where you'll get all our latest updates and new releases. You'll find me personally on Facebook and Twitter, as well as Instagram.
Well, friend, I'm afraid this is where we part ways, at least till next time. So grab a drink for the road, but remember, never lose control of your faculties. It's undignified. So may the wind be at your back. May the road rise up to meet you. And whatever we get up to next week, make sure you're here to meet me. You know, if there's one thing I've learned in 19 episodes of Drew Blood's Dark Tales, it's this. Listening is an art form in itself, same as writing and narrating. And all of us together, I'd say we paint a pretty nice picture. Good night, y'all.
Chilling tales for dark nights. Chilling tales for dark nights.